Welcome to this video series, where we explore the world of WebdriverIO to help you succeed in your test automation career. Hello, my name is 𝐼𝐴, and I'm the founder of automateNow, and I'm excited to team up with Lambda Test to bring you these awesome videos. My background is in computer engineering, and I have over a decade in software testing experience. You can learn more about my company by heading over to automatenow.io, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching automateNow. In this video, we're going to learn about selectors and how to interact with web elements. There are many options to interact with web elements using WebdriverIO. For example, you can use the popular CSS or XPath selectors. But keep in mind that there are many other options. Before we can interact with a web element, we must find it. And there are two options to find elements. One is if you want to find a single element, and the other is to find multiple elements. When we want to find a single element, we use a $sign. And to find multiple elements, we use $2 signs. How about we take a look at some examples, shall we? Alright, so first I want to show you guys how to create a test suite. A test suite is going to contain other tests inside of it. What you're seeing here is my WebdriverIO project. When I installed WebdriverIO, I was given the option to have a sample project already created. And that's why you see some files already here. For example, we have one spec file that says test end-to-end.js. If I open that app, we see a test suite. Okay, but what I want to do is create my own file from scratch. Okay, my own test suite from scratch. So let me go ahead and close this right here. Then I'm going to right click this and say new file, right? So I'm right clicking the specs folder and then saying new file. I'm going to call this file lambda test demo. We always end the file with .js and then I'm going to hit enter. Now let's go ahead and begin building that test suite. So we're going to say describe here, describe. And notice that this comes from Mocha. That is the test framework that we're using in this case. So let's go ahead and click this. And then we use open parentheses. Then we're going to use a single quote and put a description of what this test suite is all about. So in my case, I'm just going to call it element interactions. Then I'm going to go outside the single quotes and put a comma, space. And here we need to put in a function. We're just going to use an anonymous callback function by using an open and close parentheses like that. And then we're going to go outside the parentheses, hit space, and then equal sign, and then right angle brackets. We're almost there. The last thing we need here is an opening brace, and then a closing brace. Then I can hit enter, and I've created my test suite. Now that we have the test suite, let's go ahead and add the first test. To add a test, we click on here, and then we say it. Okay, this also comes from Mocha. And then I'm going to use an open parentheses. Then we need to give the test a description. So in my case, I'm going to say searches for a product. Then we're going to go outside the single quotes, add a comma. Then we're going to add another anonymous callback function. But in this case, it's going to need to be an asynchronous callback function. So we're going to say async right here. I will be explaining this in more detail in later videos. Now I'm going to go over here and add an opening brace and then hit enter. And that's how we create a test template. Next, I need to show you guys what this test is going to do. So let's head over to the Lambda Test practice website. Here's the website that we're going to be using for many of our tests. You can find this by going to ecommerce-playground.lambdatest.io. This is a practice website where you can find many different elements that you can interact with. In our case, I just want to show you guys how to click on an element. That's the first scenario that we're going to approach. So let's say that we're going to click on this search button right here. Okay. First, we need to find that element, and then we're going to click on it. So let me begin by grabbing this URL right here, and then I'm going to copy this, and we're going to use this URL in our code. Before we click on an element or do any of that, we need to tell WebDriver where to go. So we're going to use a special keyword in WebdriverIO to tell it which website it needs to visit. And to visit a website, we use the keyword browser. So here I'm going to type in browser, and then I'm going to say .url. Then we use an opening parentheses, and we add the single quotes and put in the URL. All right, so we've told our test where it needs to go. Next, we're going to tell it to click on that search button. In order to click on that button, we need to find it. And remember what I said about finding elements. In our case, we have this scenario. We're going to find a single element. So we're going to use a $sign to find that element. So I'm going to right click this element right here and hit inspect. And I can see here that this is a button of type submit. So I can use that information to create a CSS selector to locate the element. Let me go ahead and test my selector by hitting Control F, and then I'm going to say button, an opening bracket, and then I'm going to say type is equal to submit in quotes, and then close that, and then close the bracket. And here we can see that there are two results. We're looking at the first one right here because it says 1 out of 2, and it's highlighting this right here. When I put my mouse over this, I can see that the button search up here is getting highlighted, as you can see. So that's going to be the first element. And when you're trying to search a single element, it's always going to return the first element that it finds on the page. So in this case, this is perfect. Let's go ahead and copy this and go back to the code. So let us go ahead and find that element. So I'm going to use a $sign right here. And then I'm going to use an open and close parentheses. And in single quotes, I'm going to paste that selector that we found. Then we're going to go outside the parentheses and say dot click because we want to click on this element. I'm going to press enter here. And you may come across this right here in VS Code autocomplete where it adds this extra parentheses around this call right here. Okay, we don't really need this, so let me go ahead and delete it right here. Also delete this right here. We do need this await right here. Okay, we're going to explain this await later, but for now, just remember that we need to have this anytime that we're trying to find an element. All right. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and click here at the end, and then I'm going to add an open and close parentheses because this is a method call. We're calling the click method. So we finished writing our test. Let's go ahead and run it now. So first, I'm going to go ahead and save everything. I'm going to do that by hitting Control K on the keyboard, and then I let go, and then I'm going to hit S, and that's going to save everything. You can also go to the File menu here and select Save All right here. This is the shortcut that I was talking about. Now, to run the test, we need to open up a terminal. And the way we do that in VS Code is by going to View menu and then selecting Terminal. You also have this shortcut right here, Control tilde. So let me go ahead and click this. Now we have this terminal open. And then we're going to use this command. We're going to say npm space run WDIO and then press enter. Shortly, we're going to see the browser opening like so, and then we see the test running. And in fact, we see two different tests running. We have this one that we wrote, and there's some other tests over here. Now, you may be curious why it's opening up two different tests. Now, let me scroll up over here, and notice that after I run this command right here, it says npm run WebdriverIO. What's really happening is this right here. It's substituting this WDIO with this right here. This is the file that's getting run. wdio.conf.js. So that's this file over here. Okay. So if we go to this file, let me open it up and let me close this for a moment. You're going to find a section called specs in this file. And notice that this right here is telling it which specs files it needs to run. So in this case, it's saying use the current directory. And then under test folder, this is our test folder over here. Go to specs. These are our specs right here. And then basically the stars means that anything inside the specs folder is going to be run. In my case, I just want to run this file right here called lambda-test.demo.js. So let me go ahead and comment this out right here. And then I'm going to use a new line right here. In single quotes, I'm going to say ./test/specs/ and then the name of the spec file that I want to run, which is lambda-test.demo.js. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and save everything. So go to File, Save All. Then I'm going to reopen the terminal by hitting Control tilde. And then I can use the up arrow keys to bring up the last command that I ran right here. Okay, and then I'm going to press Enter. This time we should only see our test being run. And this is the browser window that's opening. Notice that there's only one. And this is the test. It's going to click the search button right here. But everything's happening so quickly that we don't really get to see what happens after the button gets clicked. And that takes me to my next topic, is how we can pause the test for a moment so we can actually see what's happening. There are multiple ways of doing that. One way is called debugging our test. We're going to learn how to debug our test in later videos. But for now, I'm going to show you how to add a simple pause to your test so you can see what happens after certain actions. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and add a new command here. We're going to say browser.pause. Then we're going to open a parentheses. And in this method, we need to use the number of milliseconds that we want to pause for. Let's just say we want to pause for 3 seconds. So that's 3000 right here. And then we're going to add the keyword await here. Now let's go ahead and save everything. Let me reopen the terminal by hitting Control tilde and then up arrow and then press enter. So we're going to rerun this command right here. And this time we should have enough time to see what happens after we click that button. And there you can see that it goes to the website, now clicks the button, and we see some items being shown to us. Now that we know how to click on elements, let's learn how to enter text into text fields. So for example, I can click on this right here and I can type iPhone and then press enter or hit this search button right here. And then we have some results over here. Let's go ahead and mimic that behavior. So first, let me right click this element right here and say inspect. And we have different things that we can look for right here. So we see that this is an input element. The type is text. We also have a name, a value. That's the value that we just entered here, iPhone. So perhaps I'm going to go with this right here, with the name of it. I'm going to say search. So let me go ahead and test a selector. I'm going to hit Control F, and then I'm going to say input, open and close brackets, and then I'm going to say name is equal to, and then in quotes, I'm going to say search. And we notice that there are 3 elements, but the first one here, when I hover my mouse, is selecting this item right here. So that's what we're going to use right here. So let me go ahead and copy this selector. So before we click on the element search, we're going to add some space here and enter a new command. We're going to say await, and then we're going to use $sign to find the element that we want to locate. Then in quotes, I'm going to add that selector, and then I'm going to go here and say dot set value. Okay, so this method is a special method that allows you to enter text into a field. And then we're going to say open and close parentheses. And in quotes, we're going to add the value that we want to enter in there. So I'm going to say iPhone. And that's how easy it is to enter text. So let's go ahead and run this test again. First, I need to save everything. By the way, this little dot, this white dot over here, represents that there's been a change to this file, but it hasn't been saved. So we need to save it first so that when we run the test, it recognizes the updated changes. So let me hit Control K and then let go of those keys and hit S. And notice that the white dot goes away. Now we need to run this again. So let me open up the terminal, and there we're going to see it opening up, enters iPhone, click search, and then we see search results. The last thing that I want to show you in this video is how we can select from a dropdown. So for example, here we have several dropdown menus. We have this My Account menu. We also have this Mega menu. So notice that if we just hover the mouse over this menu here, we can see everything, right? I'm going to show you how you can hover over an element. For in this case, we need to hover over this Mega menu. Once we hover, we need to click on one of these items. So the first thing we need to do is to hover over this guide right here. We can see that this is a span element, and it contains a class called title. It's usually not a good idea to just use the class name to locate an element. The class name can change at any time that there are changes to the web application. So in this case, I'm going to just go with the actual text that I see here, Mega menu. So let me go ahead and test a selector. I'm going to hit Control F, and then I'm going to use XPath in this case. So for XPath, we use // and then I'm going to say span, the name of the element, and then open and close brackets like that. And then inside of those brackets, I'm going to say text. This is a method, so I'm going to use open and close parentheses is equal to, and then inside quotes, I'm going to use this name right here, Mega menu. So let's go ahead and type in Mega menu and then close that. And unfortunately, we don't see any results yet. So let me go ahead and reinspect this element. I'm going to click on this right here. And here we have the text. If you pay careful attention to this text, let me double click it here. Notice that there's some white space in front of the letter M right here. So what I need to do is to try to trim that white space. So there's a special method for that. So let me go ahead and instead of using text, I'm going to say normalize space right here. Normalize dash space. This is another method. And now it's finding that element. Okay, so it's getting rid of that white space either at the front or the end of the text that I'm looking for. So let me go ahead and grab this right here. So let's go ahead and create some space here. Let me add some comments here. To add a comment, we simply use //, and I'm going to say element hover. Okay, so again, we're going to use await, then we're going to use a $sign to find a single element, and we're going to paste that selector right there. And then we're going to say dot. There's a special method to hover over an element, and that's called move to. So we're going to say move to this one right here, right? Open and close parentheses. Let me go ahead and copy this method right here so that we can see that hover, okay? And I'm also going to comment out this code right here because in this case, I want to show you how to do the hover and not do the search right here. Right, next, we need to click on one of those elements, okay? So let's go back to the website. And let's say that after we hover, we select headphones right here. So let me inspect this element here, right click, inspect, and I'm going to use this right here, the title being headphones. I'm going to say A, and then open and close brackets. We said that was the title, is equal to headphones, right? So we have one element of those right there. And let me go ahead and copy this selector right here. So right after we move to the element, I'm going to hit enter right here. I'm going to say await, and then we're going to find that other element. This needs to be a double quotes right here. Otherwise, we're going to get an error. So let me go ahead and place those single quotes into double quotes. And then we're going to say dot click. And now we're all set. We're going to go ahead and go to that menu, hover over it, and then select that item called headphones. Let's go ahead and save everything and rerun it. There we have the browser coming up. Okay, it hovers over that, it clicks headphones, and we can see here some headphones being shown. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. Check out any of the links on the screen to get connected with the Lambda test community, get certified, and get access to the code that you saw today. See you in the next video. In this video, we're going to talk about how synchronization works in WebdriverIO. We're also going to take a look at what implicit and explicit waits are. And lastly, we're going to see how to handle dynamic elements. Let's dive in. Here are some key points about waits in WebdriverIO. First of all, you should know that there is automatic waiting for WebdriverIO, meaning that if it's trying to find an element, it's not going to give up automatically. It's going to wait a certain amount of time before it gives up trying to find that element or before it throws an error. For humans, that's not a problem. We simply wait for the page to load, for the element to show up. But for the computer, it needs to know, okay, how long do I need to wait for this element to show up? Or for how long do I need to wait for the page to load? So this is very important functionality that's already built into WebdriverIO. So it's great knowing that we don't have to worry about that. However, there are some scenarios in which you may need to wait a little bit longer for certain things to happen. And that's not a problem for WebdriverIO because we're able to customize how long the wait needs to be for any given scenario. Now, there are two different types of waits that you can use. You can use implicit waits or explicit waits. It is recommended that you do not use implicit waits. Implicit waits are used to apply global wait times. For example, if you're trying to find elements, it's always going to wait a certain amount of time. It's important to note that both of these methods, implicit and explicit waits, are incompatible. So you're going to run into issues if you ever try to use them together because you're going to face longer than expected wait times. And what you should know about implicit waits is that it applies a global wait for all elements for any WebdriverIO action. So instead of using that, what we need to use is explicit waits so that we can have waits at a specific points. For example, when you're trying to wait for an element to exist on a page or for an element to be visible. And that's why WebdriverIO has this value set to 0 by default. They don't want you to use implicit waits. Instead, they want you to use explicit waits. And by default, the wait time is 10 seconds, meaning that if you're trying to find an element, it's going to wait up to 10 seconds for that element to show up. But as I mentioned earlier, you have the option to configure that amount of time that you want to wait for elements or other actions. Before moving on to some code examples, let's talk about async and await. You've seen me using this before, and now is the time for you to learn why it is important to use these two keywords when you're writing tests. And here you can see a sample test, which we wrote before. This test is simply searching for a product on a website. Here's the URL that we're going to, and this test hovers over in a menu and then selects a given item on that menu. Now, notice that we're using async right here, and we're using await over here every time that we're trying to find something or to interact with an element. Now, why do we use these two? Well, it's important to note that if you don't use these, your test will most likely fail. Why is that? Well, that is because the test is going to run through all of the commands that you have without waiting for the previous command to finish executing. Notice what happens here. First, we need to hover over a menu, and then we need to wait for the elements inside that menu to show up. So if we were to hover over the menu and not wait for the submenu items to show up before trying to click on one of those submenu items, then we would get an error. So this async and await is making sure that every command is executed one after another. Because if we don't do that, then the test is going to be out of sync. So I hope that makes sense for you. If it doesn't, think of, for example, when you're trying to log into an application. First, we provide the username, then the password, and then we click sign in, for example. Let's imagine that you're trying to put in the username and then put in the password. If we didn't have async and await in that scenario, then the test could potentially put in the username and then click sign in before putting in the password. So things will be completely out of sync. So we talked about the different waits. Now let's take a look at those waits inside of our project. So in the project, we have this file that we've seen before. wdio.conf.js. So let's open this one up. And here we can find the first timeout. It says wait for timeout. And this is the explicit timeout that I was referring to earlier. Notice that the default value is 10,000. Since that is in milliseconds, we're really looking at 10 seconds. So WebdriverIO is going to automatically wait for elements to show up for up to 10 seconds. Keep in mind that this is the global timeout. So that basically applies for commands such as waiting for an element to exist, or waiting for an element to be displayed, and so on. Now, if we wanted to change this timeout, we can simply update the number right here. Okay, so we're going to change it, for example, from 10 seconds to 30 seconds. That's one example of how you can do it from here. Now, you also have the option to change it at the test level. So we can leave this here as the default value of 10. And when we go to our test, let's open up one of the tests over here. So let's say that we have this test right here. The test goes to this website, the Lambda Test Playground. That's the website right here. And then we go to Mega Menu, and then we select headphones right here. So I'm going to change this up a little bit so that I can show you how to use explicit waits at the test level. So let me make some room over here. I'm going to comment out this line right here. Instead of clicking on it, now I'm going to wait for the element to just be visible. So let's go over here and we're going to create a constant. We're going to say const. We're going to call this headphones is equal to, and then we're going to say await. Then we use the $sign to find the element. And then we're going to paste this right here, the selector for that element. Then I can do the following. I can say await headphones dot wait for displayed, this one right here. So when WebdriverIO gets to this point right here, it is going to wait for that 10 seconds that we talked about, this right here. This is the explicit waits that we have. It's going to wait up to 10 seconds for this headphones element to show up. Now, if I want to customize that amount of time, I can do that right here within this method. I can use a curly brace right here, and then I can say timeout, and then colon, and then I can specify a new timeout. So let's say I just want to wait 1 second. I can do 1000 right there. So instead of waiting 10 seconds now, it's only going to wait 1 second. And this can be useful because sometimes you have scenarios in which you need to wait a little bit longer or a little bit less. One important thing to mention here is that explicit waits only work for single elements when you're trying to find a single element. So this is a perfect example right here. We're using a single $sign to find an element. It doesn't work when you're trying to find multiple elements. So for example, right here, I could use $2 and then I could try to find some elements, for example, all the divs on a page. In that case, WebdriverIO is not going to respect this time that we set right here. It is going to fail immediately if it doesn't find any elements. Now let's talk about how long WebdriverIO waits for your test to run. So we know that if we leave a test running for a long time, at some point it is going to fail. And that is a good measure because we don't want long running tests. That's going to take up resources on our system. Let me take you back to this file over here, WDIO config file. Now, here you have, in this case, Mocha options. Since my test framework is Mocha, that's why I see this right here. Now, notice that this says timeout 60,000. Now, that means that it's going to wait up to 60 seconds for a test to run. If any test happens to take anything longer than 60 seconds, then it's going to automatically fail the test. And of course, I have the option to change this number to any reasonable amount based on the application that I'm testing. The last thing that I want to talk about is something that is quite important because there are some elements on a website that are dynamic. For example, let's take a look at this website again. If I go here and I go to this menu and I select, for example, on mobiles and I say LGU here. Notice that I have different items that show up. Now, this is the price for these items. Now I can change the price of the items. So let's say I'm on the cheaper side, I want to go over here, nothing over say 650. Notice that as I change this slider over here, these elements over here refreshed or they got updated. Now, this is an example of Ajax working on a website. Instead of refreshing the entire website, it's only refreshing a certain section of the website. Now, for this type of elements, it's important to note that you have different strategies to wait for them using WebdriverIO. Here are some ideas on how you can handle this type of scenarios. When we have dynamic elements, we can use different commands. So for example, we have this one called waitUntil. An example for this would be waiting until an element contains a given text. You can also use wait for displayed. That's pretty obvious. You're just going to wait for the element to be displayed on the screen. You also have wait for exists. Now we're going to make sure that the element exists. This doesn't necessarily mean that the element is visible. We also have wait for clickable, wait for enabled. You also have the option to add more customization. For example, you can use custom expected conditions as well as fluent waits. Some examples of expected conditions could be waiting for the title of a page to be a given text or waiting for some URL to be present. And what fluent waits do is that they allow you to use a custom timeout as well as how often you're polling the DOM for the presence of an element. So they are quite flexible. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. In this video, we're going to cover how to use the waitUntil command. We're also going to be using this command to create custom waits. The WebdriverIO documentation refers to the waitUntil command as, quote, the universal weapon if you want to wait on something, unquote. And this is what the command looks like. We have a selector here, and then we have .waitUntil. And this takes in a condition. So we can pass in different conditions that we want to wait on. For example, you could be waiting for an element to contain a certain text. You also have the option to pass in a timeout message, and interval. And there are a couple of ways to use this command. For instance, you can use it on a web element like we're doing here. You can also use it on the browser instance. Now let's go ahead and automate some scenarios. And for this, we're going to be using this Lambda test playground where we can automate different scenarios. The one we're going to be doing now, we're going to go to this menu here that says Mega Menu. Then we're going to select under computers, we're going to select printer right here. And first, we're going to check for this title right here that says printers. I went ahead and created a new spec file. I call this one waitUntil.js. So here I have my test suite, and I'm now going to add that test scenario that we talked about. So let's go ahead and begin by saying it. Then we're going to describe this test. We're going to say uses the waitUntil command. All right. Then we're going to say async, and we're going to use an anonymous function. Then an brace, and now we can start writing the test. First, we're going to visit the Lambda test website. So we're going to paste that in here. We're going to say browser, go to this URL. Now let's go ahead and maximize the window. We're going to say browser.maximize window here. Then we need to go to the mega menu and select printers. I'm going to reuse some of the code that I used in the previous video. So let me open up this spec file up here, and I'm going to reuse this code right here. I'm going to explain that in a second. Let's go ahead and copy this. And let's head back over here, and we're going to paste it here. Now, what this is doing is basically going to the mega menu, and then it hovers over that menu to expand the menu. And then we're going to select, instead of headphones here, we're going to select printers. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in printers here, and we're going to click on that. So far, this is what we're doing. We're going to this menu here. We're selecting printers, and now we're going to check for this right here, for printers. So let me go ahead and inspect this element here. Right click, inspect. We can see here that this is an H1 element. So we're going to be using this information to locate that element and then extract that text. Let's go back to the code. So let's go over here. We're going to create a constant here. We're going to say title. Let's call it title is equal to await. And then we're going to locate the element. We're going to use that H1. Now let's go ahead and use that waitUntil command. We're going to go over here and we're going to say await title dot waitUntil. This right here. And as we saw in the slide, this is going to require that we pass in a condition. So the condition that we're going to use is that we want to make sure that the element contains the text that says printers. Let's see how we're going to do that. So I'm going to say async function. Now we're going to write the body of this function. So let's go ahead and use a brace here. And we need to write a return statement here. And we're going to say await this.getText is equal to printers. Let's go ahead and run it to test it out. So let me bring the terminal, control tilde, and then I've already made sure that I'm going to be using this waitUntil.js file. I went into my WebdriverIO config file and I updated this right here. This is the spec file that we're going to run, wait.until.js. We're going to go here and we're just going to say npm run WDIO. And here is going to the website. And unfortunately, it looks like it failed. Let's see what happens here. Cannot call click on elements. So it's looking at an anchor tag with title. Okay, printers. So if we go to the website, so we're looking for printer instead of printers. So I just need to fix that in my test. So let me go back to my test. And here we're going to change this from printers to printer. Before I rerun this test, let me go ahead and add a pause here so we can see what's going on. So we're going to say browser.pause. and then we're going to use maybe 3000 milliseconds. So let's go ahead and run this, save everything, and then rerun it. Now let me show you the scenario when this test fails. So here, I'm going to add an extra S here, and then I'm going to save it and rerun this. And as the test runs, we can see here in the console what's happening. It's trying to check for that text, and then we see that the test failed. If I scroll up a little bit here, I'm going to see that it says wait until condition timed out after 10,000 milliseconds. Now, if you saw the previous video, we know where this 10,000 comes from. That's declared over here in this WebdriverIO config file. That's a default explicit timeout that WebdriverIO uses for finding elements. So it tried for 10 seconds to find that text, printers with 2S at the end, and it failed to do so. So we're able to see the error right here. So next, let's take a look at another scenario for using wait until. So let me go back to the website. And this time, after we land on this page, the printers page, we're going to scroll down here and we're going to look for this pre-order checkbox right here. So when I click on this checkbox, notice what's going to happen. The page is going to get refreshed over here, and we see that these two new elements show up. So I'm going to do a check to make sure that there are two results after I check this box that says pre-order. And the first thing I need to do is to find this checkbox here. So let me right click this, inspect. Now, if we notice this right here, it says pre-order. I can just click on that instead of the checkbox, and it works the same way. So I'm going to look for this text here, and that's what I'm going to click on. So let me test some scenarios over here. I'm going to say Control F, and then I'm going to test a locator here. So let me reinspect this right here. I know that this is a label element. So I'm going to say / label, and then in brackets, I'm going to say normalize space is equal to, and then I'm going to say pre-order. I'm not getting any results, and it's probably because I misspelled this right here. It says label. So let me change this to an L here. And now we have two results, okay? Now, if we look at the first one here, if I hover over this, it's showing me some element off the screen here. So this is probably a hidden element. If I go to the second one, and that one does show me the correct one, this one right here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to select the second element. So I'm going to put this entire selector here in parentheses, and then I'm going to use brackets, and I'm going to put a number 2 because I want the second one. All right, so now I'm only seeing one result. All right, so that's the one that we want. So let's go ahead and grab this selector here and go back to the code. Let's go ahead and close this right here, and let's create a new constant here. I'm going to say const checkbox is equal to, and then we're going to await and then locate the element. And here's my selector. I need to change this here into double quote. We're going to click on that element. So here we're going to say await checkbox dot click. Now let's go back to the website to explain one thing. And here we're seeing what happens when we click on this box right here. Right? We select the box, and we're going to see two elements show up. So we need to look for the presence of these two elements right here. I'm going to right click this, inspect, and this I can see that this is an image element. But if I scroll up a little bit, if I look for its parent, I notice that there is one element here that is selecting the entire thing, okay, the image and the text. So this one is a div that contains this class called product thumb. So if we look for this element, we're going to be able to determine how many of these results are showing up on the screen. I'm just going to use a CSS selector by using the class name. So I'm going to use dot product dash thumb, and notice that I get two results here. So this is my selector right here. So let me copy this. Now in my code, I'm going to use the wait until command once again. And this time I'm going to use browser. Okay, I'm going to use the browser. The first time that we used the actual element here. In this case, I'm going to use browser. Remember, I showed you guys in the slides that you can use it either for a web element, you can use it on the browser as well. So here I'm going to say browser.wait until. Then we're going to use an asynchronous function here. So we're going to say async function. Then we're going to create the body of this function. And what we want to do here is to check for the number of elements that are showing up on the screen after we select that box that says pre-order. So here I'm going to say const element count is equal to, and I'm going to use $2 because we want to find multiple elements. $, then we're going to paste in the selector that we had, and then we're going to use the dot length to get the length of this right here. Then we're going to return this. We're going to say return await element count is equal to 2. And the reason why I'm using 2 is because we expect 2 elements to show up after we select that checkbox. So what this is basically saying is that we're going to go ahead and click on that checkbox that says pre-order. Then we're going to wait until the number of elements that show up, or the number of results that are there, is equal to 2. Before I run it, I want to make sure I fix this right here that says printers with 2 S's. I want to make sure that I'm looking for printers here. So let's go ahead and save it again, and now we can run it. Let me go ahead and bring the window over here. It's selecting printers. It has selected pre-order here, and we saw that 2 elements showed up. I can change this to 3 here, and then we'll see that this test is going to fail. I got the test running on another screen here, and we can see what's going on in this side right here. So eventually the test fails, and we can see here, if I scroll up a little bit, we're going to see the wait condition has timed out after 10 seconds. So let me go ahead and change this back to 2. Now let me show you how you can use a custom timeout. We've seen right here that this right now is waiting up to 10 seconds for those 2 elements to show up. Now, what if we wanted to shorten that amount of time? We can certainly do that here. And let me take you back to the slides for one moment here. And here we have the different ways on how we can use waitUntil. Notice that we have created the condition so far, but we have these optional parameters here that we can pass in. For example, the timeout, message that shows up when the timeout runs out, and we have an interval. Interval refers to how often are we pulling the DOM, or how often are we checking for this condition. By default, it's going to check every half a second, okay? So we can change this to be more frequent or less frequent. Let's see how we can do that. So here I'm going to modify this right here, the waitUntil, and I'm gonna go over here, and I'm gonna put a comma, and then a new brace, open up a new brace, and here we're going to say timeout, and then we say colon is equal to whatever timeout we want it to be. So instead of 10 seconds, we can change it to say, I don't know, let's say 3 seconds, 3000 milliseconds there. Then we can also add a timeout message, okay? What message is going to show up in case timeout runs out. And lastly, we can set an interval. Okay, this is completely optional. All of these 3 items are optional. So I'm just showing you guys how to do it here. So I'm going to say interval, and then I'm going to say, instead of 500 milliseconds, which is the default, I'm going to say every second. So we're going to say 1000 here. And I need a comma over here. I want this to fail in the same, so I can show you guys it's not going to wait 10 seconds. So instead of this time, we're going to say change it back to 3, and we're going to rerun this to make sure that it's only waiting 3 seconds instead of 10,000 or 10 seconds, okay? So let's go ahead and rerun this. So right now it's trying to find those elements. It's going to wait 3 seconds, and then it fails. And if I scroll up here, we're going to see that we're going to get the error message, right? So this time the test failed a lot faster. It didn't wait the 10 seconds. It only went 3 seconds. And we can see the result right here. It says error did not find the correct number of results. All right, this is coming from this error message that we created here. So this is more customization that you can add for your timeout. This is very similar to fluent waits in Selenium, where you can set your own timeout and how frequently you want to pull the DOM for things. Next, I want to show you guys how we can turn this code right here when we're waiting for these 3 elements. Let me change this back to 2 actually. We're going to change this code right here into a function that can be called from other places. So for example here, I'm going to grab this code. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. And then we're going to create a new function here. Let me go up here, and I'm going to say async function. We're going to call this one number of results to be, and then it's going to accept a parameter, which is going to be called the count. Okay. Let's go ahead and add a body to this. And now we're going to paste that code that we had. And what we're going to need to change here is this count, right? So instead of hard coding the number 2, we're going to say count right here. So whatever is passed in, that's what we're going to be checking for. And now we're going to look for waitUntil command here, and we're going to say number of results to be, and then we're going to pass in 2 because we're expecting 2. Now we also need to say return here, return, and then await. We need to wait for this. Now if I run this, it's going to behave the same way. But now we have abstracted this code right here so that we can reuse it in other places if we wanted to. And this is a great way for you to create your own custom functions. And before I wrap up this video, I just want to leave you guys with some helpful tips and tricks for you to remember as you're testing this waitUntil command. Just remember that in this scenario right here, you want to make sure that you're always using this return and await. If you leave this out, then your test is not going to behave the way you expect it to. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to is something that you probably already noticed. Notice that here I'm using a regular function right here in this place and also in this place right here. This is different than what I've done in the past where I've used an arrow function, like in this case right here. I would encourage you to use the regular function when you're using this waitUntil command. And the reason why I say that is because anytime that you use the this keyword, it is going to behave differently depending on the type of function that you're using. If this is a regular function, then when we say this, is referring to this object right here, or this element. If I was not using this regular function, let's say for example that I went ahead and used this right here, let me copy this, and I said something like this, it's not going to do what you expect it to do, or what you think it's going to do. So instead of saying this, and you might think that it's referring to this guy right here, it's not actually referring to that element. It's actually going to return undefined because it's not referring to this scope, it's referring to the surrounding scope. Now, if you still want to go ahead and use this arrow function, well, you need to change this to right here. You need to say title.getText, and that will make it work the way you expect it to. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to organize your tests and test suite. There is a popular design pattern for this, which is known as the page object model or page object pattern. The page object model has many benefits. One of them being your tests are going to be easier to read. But I think the most important one is maintainability. It's going to become very easy for us to maintain our tests. Let me show you how. In this slide, I've represented a website on the left side here. Notice that this website has many different pages, as many websites do. For example, we may have a home page, a login page, a profile page, etc. Now, for every page, we're going to be having what is known as a page object. Okay, that is going to be a separate class. That page object is going to contain functionality that pertains to a given page. So for example, if you have a login page, the page object for the login page will have things such as how to locate elements on that page. You may also have functions for logging in, for instance. Aside from the page objects, we're also going to have separate test classes. Now, the test classes are going to have the actual test that we want to write, or the functionality that we want to test. These tests are not going to contain any logic, okay? They're simply going to be calling different functions from the page objects. So you can see that there's going to be one-to-one relationships between the tests and the page objects. If at any point there's a front-end change to the website, which causes our test to break, we won't have to do anything with our tests. The test will stay the same. We only need to update the page object that corresponds to the given test that broke. Let's have a look at the website for more context. When we visit this Lambda Test Playground website, we land on this page right here. So this would become our home page, and we would create a page object for this home page. That page object will have all of the different methods that we're going to need in order to interact with this page right here. Now, let's have a look at this other page, for example, blog. This would be a separate page object, also containing functionality to interact with this page. Now, let's take a look at my account here. We're going to be automating this one right here, login. So we're going to create a page object for the login page, and we're going to find all the different elements on here, how to locate those elements, and how to sign into this page. We're going to be creating a test that is going to allow us to log in to this website. Let's have a look at that. We're going to begin by creating a new folder. That folder is going to contain all the page objects. So I'm going to right click on this right here that says tests. Okay, I'm going to right click that and say new folder. I'm going to call this folder page objects. And before we create that login page object, first we're going to create what is known as the main page or the base page. That page object is going to contain logic that is going to be similar to all the different pages. For example, this page is going to contain things such as clicking on elements, entering text. That is something that we can do on any page. Okay, it's not going to be specific to a given page. So we're going to have a separate page known as the base page or main page, which contains all these common things. I'm going to right click the newly created folder and say new file. And I'm going to call this page.js. All right, let's go ahead and start building this class. We'll say export default class, and then we're going to call this page. Open and close brace. I have misspelling here, so let me fix that. Let's have a look at the last test that we wrote, which is this one, waitUntil.js. This test showed you how to do different wait operations. The first thing that we do here, notice that we say browser.url. So we're visiting this URL. And pretty much we do that for all the other test classes that were written. We say the page that we want to visit. Now I want to abstract this information away from this test right here. Okay, the test shouldn't be concerned with this logic. We can put this away in this base page over here. Okay, so let's go over here, and I'm going to create the first function in here. we're going to call this one open. So we'll say open, and then this is going to take in a parameter. We're going to call this one path. Then we're going to add the body. And we're going to say return browser dot URL. Now let's grab the URL that we've been using. So let's go over here. This is the URL right here. And we'll paste that in here. And then at the end of this, we're going to add the path. We're going to say $, and then in braces, we're going to say path. You may need to change the single quote here to a tilde. Let me take you to the website. When we visit this page, this is the URL right here. We can see that it has index.php and then question mark route equals. Okay, so this part right here, we are missing right here from the URL. If we visit a different page, for example, the home page, notice that it also has this index.php question mark route equals. So we need to add this information to our URL right here. So let me go ahead and grab this, okay, copy, and we're going to add it to the code. We need to add that right here after lambda test.io. So with this method, we're going to be able to call it and pass in a path for the page that we want to visit. There is one last thing that I need to do here. So this is going to be at the top. We need to add an import for this browser keyword. So we're going to say import, we'll say browser, we'll say from, then we'll add single quotes at WDIO/globals. Let me fix a typo here, globals, like that. All right, so now we have the main page object here. Next, we can create the page object for the login page. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, I'm going to right-click Page Objects and say New File. I'm going to call this one login.page.js. I recommend that you use this pattern right here, where you have the name of the page and then .page, so that it is clear to everyone that this is a page object. Okay, so we're going to hit Enter. Every page object needs to inherit from the main page object over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that here. We're going to say import page from, and we'll say single quotes /page.js. Now let's go ahead and create the class. We'll say class login page extends page, and then we'll add our body. Then at the end here, we're going to make sure that there's only one instance of this page. We're going to say export default new login page. Now, what are we going to put here? Basically, we're going to have all the different selectors for the elements that are going to be found on the login page. We're also going to create a method for logging in. So first, we're going to create getter methods for all the elements that we want to interact with. In our case, we simply want to log in. So we need to create a method for locating the username, also for the password, and for the sign in button. So let's take a look at the website one more time. And I'm going to inspect this element right here. I'm going to right click and say inspect. And we see that this is an input element, and we can use different things. One of them being the ID right here. So we can use this input email. Now let's go ahead and create a getter function for this right here. So I'm going to copy this, and here we're going to say get input username. Then we're going to say return, and then $ to locate the element. And then we'll add in that ID that we found. Okay. Let me go ahead and add the rest of the elements to add them here. Okay, so I created one for the password and also for the login button. Now we're going to create a function that is going to do the whole login process, entering the username, the password, and then clicking the login button. Let's go down here and create that function. We're going to say async login. This will take in two parameters, the username and a password. Then we're going to say await this dot input username. We know that this is going to return this element right here, the username. Then we're going to say dot set value, and we're going to enter the username. We're going to do the same thing for the password. So let's go ahead and duplicate this line of code. I'm going to hold Shift Alt down. If you're a Mac user, you're going to hit Shift Option down, and then I need to update this here to password, and this one also. Lastly, we just need to click the button for logging in. Say await this dot click login dot click. And there we have it. We created our getter methods, and then we have a function here to be able to log into the website. The last thing that I want to do is to create another function over here that is going to open this page, this login page. So I'm going to say open, and this is going to say return super dot open. Now we know that this is going to call the other function that we wrote in this main page class. This is going to go to this URL and it's going to visit whatever path we pass in. Okay, so we need to find a path for the login page. Let's go to the website and we see that the path for this page is simply login. So we're going to add that. We're going to put that right here. We have everything that we need in order to create the first test that uses the page object model. We have the login page object. Now all we need to do is to create a login test that is going to use this page object right here along with this function in order to log into the website. Now we're going to create a new spec file that has that login test. Right now I notice that it looks like this page object is under specs. I don't want it to be there. I want it to be under test. So we're going to drag and drop this into tests. Okay, we're going to say move. And now we have the separation here. This is what we want. We want to have page objects separate from the actual specs. Okay, so next we're going to right click specs. And we're going to say new file. And here we're going to call it login.spec.js. Notice that we added the word spec. Okay, I also recommend that you do this. Same thing with page objects. Just like we did here, we have login.page. We know that this is a page object, and that's how we're going to be able to tell that this is a page object, while this one is a spec file containing tests. Now I'm going to add some skeleton code to save some time. So here, the first thing that you see is an import statement. This is basically going to import the login page object. This path right here may be different depending on how you set it up. And here we have the test that we're going to write. It's going to log in using valid credentials. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to say await login page, and we're going to call the open method inside of that page. Then I'm going to log in. So we're going to say await. Let me fix this one up here as well. We're going to say login page dot login. Okay. Now I already created an account with this website, so you may need to do that if you're following along. And the username that I use is happytester@test.com. My password is going to be simply password. Then I'm going to add a pause here so that we can see what's going on. I'm going to say await browser.pause. We'll give it 3 seconds. Now let's go ahead and run this test to see how it works. Let me go ahead and save all my work. Then I'm going to bring up the terminal and we're going to run this command, npm run WebdriverIO. Now I'm going to make sure that I'm running only this spec file here. So let me go ahead to the WebdriverIO config file, and I'm going to update this here to say login.spec.js. You may refer to the previous videos in this series to learn about this WebdriverIO config file. But essentially, we're just telling it to run only this spec file right here, the login spec. All right, so let's go back to the test, save everything one more time, and we're going to run this command right here. And it looks like the test failed. I took a closer look at this, and I noticed that in the login page, there's a couple of issues. For example, this parentheses right here don't need to be here. This was automatically added by the IDE. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this stuff right here. And I'm also going to update the path, right? I noticed that the path is not just login, but it's actually account/login. Okay, so let me go ahead and save this and rerun the test. And here we see the website opening up. It enters the username, the password, it does it very fast. But we can see that the test is passing this time. So let's do a quick recap of what we did. In order to implement the page object model, we created this page.js. That class contains all methods that are going to be common to all page objects. Next, we created a page object for the login page. And this one contains specific functions for the login page. For example, going to the login page, finding the different elements, actually logging in, and so forth. And lastly, we created a spec file, which contains the actual test that we want to do for the login page. Notice a few things about this test. First, it's very easy to read. Notice right here it says login page.open, login page.login. So it's very self-explanatory. We can see exactly what is happening. And it's also going to be easy to maintain. Let's say, for example, that there's a change to the website and the selectors for the login page change. You won't have to update this at all. This will stay the same. We will simply go to the page object and update the selectors here. I hope you enjoy learning about the page object model. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. In this video, we're going to be talking about 2 very important topics in WebdriverIO, and those are fixtures and hooks. We're going to take a look at the fundamental role that these 2 things play when we're creating automated scripts. Let's have a look. So what are fixtures? Fixtures essentially allow us to have a predetermined condition or to establish a certain state before we run the test suite. A good example could be when you're testing a database. You want to first make sure that you have a database connection before you run a test suite against the database. So that would be an example of using a fixture to establish the database connection. And then we have hooks. And hooks are basically some methods or functions that we use to create some setup or teardown for our test. We use hooks to create test fixtures. Let's have a look at some common hooks. There are many hooks to choose from. Here are some of the common ones that you may come across. And this is the first one right here that says before. This is a function that runs one time before the test suite. So this would be an example of that database where I said we would want to establish a connection to the database. We would put this in a before hook. Then we have after. This is something that happens after all of the tests have run. It only runs one time. An example again would be to make sure that we close that database connection. Then we have before each and after each. And these run before every test method and after every test method, respectively. To show you these, I'm going to go ahead and open this file called WebdriverIO configuration. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this up. This is part of WebdriverIO. And you're going to find a section called hooks. Okay, this contains all of the details and information that you need in order to learn more about these hooks. Okay, if you scroll down here, you're going to find one that's already active, that is being used every single time we run a test. And that is this one that says after test. And it says here that this after test is a function that gets executed after a test. And this only applies if you're using 𝐿 and 𝐲𝐶. All right, so we are using 𝐿 in this example. And we can see that if the test does not pass, it is going to take a screenshot of the failed test. And here I've shown you how hooks are used in this configuration file for certain things to happen given certain conditions. Now let's take a look at how we can use hooks within our spec files to control the flow of our tests. Let me go ahead and open up this login spec.js file that we have here. And this is pretty straightforward. It just goes to a login page and then logs in. Let's take a look at that login page. So this is it right here. This is the Lambda test playground, and it goes to this login screen and then enters the login information and clicks login. Now imagine that we had a suite of tests and they all needed to log in. Ideally, we would want to have a hook that would go to this login page, and then we could abstract that information from every single test. So we don't have to do it every single time inside of our tests. We would put it inside of a hook so that the hook will run before each test and it goes to this screen so that we can log in. Let me show you what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is to get rid of this part right here that says login page.open. I want to put that inside of a hook. As my test suite grows, I just want to make sure that a hook is taking care of that information, going into the login page. And then I can test the rest of the functionality. So let's go ahead and add a hook over here. And we're going to say before each. Notice that this is coming from 𝐿. Okay, that's another thing that I forgot to mention to you guys. There are some hooks that are specific for WebdriverIO, and there are others that are specific to 𝐿. In my case, I'm using 𝐿, so I'm going to be using this before each. Okay, so I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to just say async function, and we're going to add that information that we want to abstract away. So here, I'm going to grab this right here. Let's cut it and paste it over here. All right. So this before each method is going to run before every test that I have in here. Now, in this case, I only have one test, but let's imagine that we had multiple tests in here. Before every single test, we would first go to the login page, and then we'll take care of the rest of the stuff. And by doing this, we're making our code more modular. We're also reducing code duplication. For example, if we create a new test down here, let's just copy this one right here. And let's pretend we add a new one over here, and actually multiple ones, right? So all of these other tests won't have to repeat this code of going to the login page. This is the advantage of having this right here. So before every single one of these tests runs, first it's going to run this code right here, which is to go to the login page. All right. We would want to use a before each here, not a before. Remember that the before is only going to run one time before all of the tests, while before each will run before every single one of these tests. So if you want to add another hook here, we would simply copy this one right here. And let's say that we wanted to run some other code after every single test. So we would simply change this right here from before each to after each. Now let's go ahead and change this to after each. And in here, we would have whatever code, right, that we want to run after each test. If we want to just run a code that runs after all of the tests, we would copy this. We could do this right here and we'd say after, right? So the after is going to make sure that this code only runs one time after all the tests are done. In this simple example, we saw how to use a before each hook to navigate to a given page before executing tests. Other examples could be to prepare data or test data for our test to use before the test runs, or doing some performance monitoring, or doing some logging. There are many examples. Can you think of any? Comment down below. And before I end this video, I want to show you guys some additional resources that you can find so that you can learn more about these hooks, because there is a lot of information to take in, especially when you've never used hooks before and you're not too sure how to use them or where to use them. All right, so if we go to the WebdriverIO website, you can click on Docs right here, and then you can navigate to Configuration. Just click on that, and here's the section for hooks. If you scroll down, we can just do a Control Find here, Control F, and then look for hooks. This right here has all of the hooks and information on each one of them, okay? It also has information about the parameters that we can use for each hook, all right? Notice here that there's quite a long list of hooks that we can use, but this just gives us a lot of flexibility on how we can organize our tests, okay? There's a lot of good stuff in here that we can use to make best use of our code. All right, so now let's take a look at another one, which is 𝐚𝐫𝐿. Right, if you go to the 𝐚𝐫𝐿 website, that's the testing framework that we have been using with WebdriverIO. So in this case, we can scroll down here and look at before, after, before each, all of these hooks right here. Click on this link, and this is going to take us to all of the details for each one of these hooks. This is the sample code that I showed you guys earlier. But in addition to that, you can see more examples down here on how to use these hooks and different scenarios for each of them and how to apply them. So go ahead and check it out, and I hope you find it useful. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. In this video, we're going to learn how to parameterize our test. Test parameterization means that we're going to run the same test with different sets of data. A good example for this is, say you have a login page, and you want to be able to test a login page with different sets of data. In the first scenario, for instance, you could say that you want to provide a good username but a bad password. In the second scenario, you can provide no username and a good password. So you get the idea. You want to see how the application reacts with different scenarios. Let's have a look at an example. In the example that I'm going to show you guys, we're going to be using the Lambda test playground. You can get to it by going to this URL here. Once you're on there, you can go to My Account and then click on Register. Here we have a form that's going to ask us for some basic information so that we can register for this website. All right, so let's go ahead and fill out some of this information so I can show you guys what we want to do. Okay, I'm going to put in some fake information here for now. Okay. Then some random numbers here. And then for the password, I'm just going to leave it blank. This is where we're going to focus our attention in these fields right here for the password. We want to be doing some password validation to make sure that when the user registers, the password validation is working properly. Now, I'm going to click Continue now. Notice that we get an error message. It says that this password must be between 4 and 20 characters long. Now, I've entered no password, so I know that the application is behaving properly, right? It's not letting me continue because I haven't entered a password. Now, let's go ahead and enter a password, but it's below the minimum requirements. I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, and also here for the confirmation, 1, 2, 3. If I click Continue, again, I will get the error message that's saying that it's not meeting the minimum requirements. So this is working as expected. I'm going to start by showing you guys this page object here. We're using the page object model, and you can refer to our previous video in this series to learn more about that. But essentially what I've done is created a page object for that registration page. Okay, I've called this one here register.page.js, and this falls under this page objects folder. Now, this right here contains all of the getter methods for the different elements on that page, at least the elements that I'm going to be interacting with. Again, here we have the first name, the last name, the email, and so forth, right? So all the fields that I want to fill out, I want to put those here. And then I also have a method here called register. Okay, this requires that we pass in a first name, last name, email, like all of the minimum requirements are listed here. Okay, and then once we do that, we can see what's happening here. We're saying first name, that set value, and we're going to enter whatever the user passes in, right? For the first name, same thing for the last name, etc. We also have another method here called open, right? All we're going to do here is to go to that page directly. We're going to access this account/register. Okay, that's the path for the registration page. And I've also created another method to be able to retrieve the error message that gets shown to the user when they enter the incorrect password or don't meet the minimum requirements for the password. Okay, so this is what this is going to do here. All right, so now we're going to write the actual test that's going to do this. Okay, I've also created another folder here called Parameterization. Okay, so this is under test. Okay, and inside there we have our spec file, and this is called register.spec.js. Okay, this is what it looks like right now. It's just a skeleton, but as you can see, we have a before hook here, before each, which is going to navigate to that registration page, as I mentioned before. Right, we're calling register page that open, and that's going to go here. Okay, it calls the superclass, which is basically this URL for the Lambda test website. Okay, or Lambda test playground. Right, once we are there, we're going to go ahead and do that password validation that we talked about. Now, there's different ways of doing this here. I could write a simple for loop here, create an array of objects that has all of the information that I want to try to input into that form. The way that I'm going to show you guys how to do this is by using a JSON file. We're going to put all of our test data that we want to use in the test. We're going to put it in a JSON file, and then we're going to read from that file so that the test can execute on it. All right. So let's go ahead and begin by doing that. All right, so let's go ahead and create that JSON file here. I'm going to put it in the same folder that I have this right here, my spec file. So I'm going to right click Parameterization, and then I'm going to say new file, and I'm going to call this one register data.json. Right? So I already have the set of data that I want to use, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste that information. I'm going to paste it here. So let's see what we have here. All right, so we have an array with 3 different objects inside of it. Right, the first one says that the first name is going to be test, the last name is going to be 1, and so on. Notice that for the password we have nothing. Right, so we have an empty string basically. We're not going to be entering a password. In the second scenario, we have a password that has only 3 characters, 1, 2, and 3. And in the last scenario, we have a password that has 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to meet the minimum requirements of 4, but the confirmation password is going to be incorrect. Notice that for each of these scenarios, we have the expected error message. Okay, in the first scenario, it's going to say that the password must be between 4 and 20 characters long. Obviously, we haven't entered a password, so we should see this error message. Same thing for the second scenario. Since we only entered 3 characters for the password, we should see the same error message. And when we enter the correct amount of characters for the password, but the confirmation password is not the same, then we should see a different error message as listed here. Now that we have this information, we're going to create the test so that we can read this data, and each time the test runs, it's going to execute the test with this set of data, and then with this data, and lastly with this data. So the test will run 3 times, and each time it's going to grab the different objects in this array. Now let's go ahead and write the actual test. We're going to go back to our spec file over here, and then we're going to import that file, this JSON file that we just created. That's going to have our test data. So let's go ahead and import that information so that we can have it ready for our test. I'm going to say import. We're going to call this test data, and then from. Now we need to provide the path for this file right here. Since this is in the same folder as the test, I can just say // and then the name of the file, which is register data.json. We also need to add an assert here. I'm going to say assert and then type JSON. All right, that's all we need to do there. Next, we're going to go down to the test, and we're going to write a for loop. This for loop is going to be used to read the different objects from that JSON array. All right, so let's go ahead and say here for, and then we're going to say const, let's call it data of test data. Let's go ahead and write the body of our for loop. And here we're going to call that register method. All right, so if we go back here to this page object that we wrote, register.page, we have something called register. Okay, so I'm going to call this method right here, register, and I'm going to pass in all of this information so that we can do the registration. Okay, so let's go back over here. And here we're going to say await register page dot register. And then we can pass in the data from the JSON file. And the way we do that is by using data dot, and then we can pass in whatever information we want to pass. So the first thing that we need to pass in is the first name. Okay, so if we go back, take a look at this JSON file once again, we can see here that we have this first name, last name, email. So those are the things that we're going to be calling in. Okay, we're going to call this first name right here. So we're going to say data dot first name, then comma. We know that we need a last name. All right, so we're going to say data dot last name, and so on. Let me go ahead and finish this up. All right, so I've entered all of the information that I need right here, all right, for that method. And then what I want to do is to slow the test down a bit so that I can see what's going on, so I can show you guys. So we're going to put a pause here. After we fill out the form, I'm going to say browser dot pause, and let's just call for two seconds here. Then we're going to make an assertion. Okay, we're going to go ahead and notice that this form here, when we say register, it's actually going to click the continue button, right? So after we click continue, we're going to pause for 2 seconds, and then we're going to perform the validation of the error message. What type of error message is being shown on the screen? We're going to create a constant here. We're going to call it error message is equal to await register page dot get error message. Once we've gotten the error message, we're going to perform the validation. I'm going to say await expect error message dot to equal, and we're going to grab from the data. Notice that we have in the data the expected error message right here. So this is called error message. So here we're going to say data dot error message. I think that's what it's called here. Error MSG. Yep, just like that. Now is a good time for us to do a quick recap on what we have done with this test. Let's begin here at the top. We have said that we have some data called registerdata.json. That JSON file contains the different sets of data that we want to use during test execution. Okay, we'll take a look at that again in a second here. But the first thing here that we're going to do is go to the registration page. Okay, we land on the registration page, and then we have the actual test. Okay, and this test has a for loop. Okay, this is important. We're doing test parameterization, so we're using a for loop to be able to iterate through different sets of data or different scenarios that we want to test. Okay, so basically we're reading the data, and we're going to then go to the registration page right here. When we say register page.register, if we take a look at this method right here, we see that this method requires that we pass in the first name, the last name, the email, the phone number, password, and the confirmation password. It then goes in and fills out all of this information. Okay, once it fills out all that information, fills out the web form, it clicks on the continue button. Okay, that's all it's doing right here. After we click continue, we're going to pause so that we can see what's going on. This is just for testing purposes. And then we're going to check for an error message. Okay, we're going to check for an error message to make sure that it matches a certain error message that we expect. Now, take a look at this registered data.json, right? So here we have the 3 scenarios that we're testing. Okay, in the first scenario, we're going to use this first name, this last name, this email, this phone number, and for the password. Okay, this is the part that we're testing. Notice that we're leaving this empty. Okay, we're not entering a password, nor are we entering a confirmation password. If we do that and click continue on the form, we should see this error message right here. Okay, that's the first scenario. It's basically saying that we need a password that is between 4 and 20 characters. In the next scenario, we change things up a little bit here, but the important thing here again is the password. Notice that we have entered something this time, but it's not long enough. It's only 3 characters long. So we should again see a similar error message in that case. In the last scenario, right, we have now entered the correct amount of characters. We have 4 characters, but notice that the confirmation password is not the same as the first original password. So we should see a different error message, right? It's saying that the confirmation does not match. Okay, so this is basically what this test is going to do. Let me take you to the website again. And here we have the web form. So again, we're going to go ahead here. We're going to say, let me go back here 1 second. Right, so here we have, let's take a look at this one. Let's just do this test 1. Okay, so basically it's going to go here and say test. Go to last name, it's going to say 1. And then it's going to say test1@test.com. It will then go ahead and enter some random number here for the phone number. And then for the password, we're going to be leaving it blank in the first scenario. Okay, no password confirmation. Then it's going to click continue. When it clicks continue, notice that we get an error message. This is the error message that we're going to be validating. We're going to ensure that this error message matches what we expect. In this case, no password was entered, so obviously we're seeing that the password needs to be between 4 and 20 characters long. Now, if we go back to the test, we're going to be checking here for this error message right here, right? This is the error message that we expected to see. So if we find that error message, then the test will pass. In the second scenario, again, we expect the same error message. If we find that error message, the test passes again. Okay. If at any point we don't find the appropriate error message, then the test will fail. For example, in this last scenario, we are providing, like we said, the correct length, but the wrong confirmation. So we should see this error message right here, not this one over here. The next step here is to execute the test. Now, I've already done that beforehand. I ran the test on the Lambda Test Cloud platform. If we go here to Lambda Test Playground or Lambda Test website, we're going to find, once you create your account and everything, you're going to find this automation section right here. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to navigate to the last run that I did right here. So this one is from today. I'm going to click on this right here. And we can see the test run. These are all the steps, all the commands that I ran. And here we have the video of the test execution. Let's go ahead and play this. Okay, I'm going to make this a little bit larger. And we should see the test running here. And we can see here the test 1 is being run. Then it's going to click, right? No password, it's going to click. And then it's going to show this error message. This is the second run. Okay. And we should see the last run right here as well. Okay, there we see the test number 3. We have entered the correct length, but the wrong confirmation. And there we see that right there. Okay, so all of our tests passed because we have found the correct error message every single time. And we can see here, right here, that the test executed. It took 24 seconds to run, and our test was successful. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. We're going to see how we can automate frames and iFrames. First, we need to take a look at what a frame and an iFrame is. So let's have a look at frames. Okay, so when we talk about frames, it's basically something that used to allow developers to divide a website into different sections. And when I say used to, it's because this is no longer in practice today. This is more of an obsolete thing that used to be used early on during the 90s, perhaps in the early 2000s. You would have different sections of the website that would have different frames. In this example, we have 3 different frames in which you could showcase different items or different type of information within these frames. Okay, let me show you guys what the HTML code will look like. So when we refer to frames, we had to talk about frame sets. Okay, so frames are inside of a frame set, which defines the frames inside of it. Notice here that we have 2 frames inside of this frame set. The first frame has given HTML document, okay, and this other frame has a different HTML document. Now let's move on to iFrames. So iFrames are a modern and flexible way for you to integrate external content into a website. Essentially, you could have multiple websites within a single page. Notice here, right here, we have a website which has 2 different websites in it. Okay, so this would be an iframe that would contain some website, for example, google.com. Here we have another website that would be, for example, for WebdriverIO. Both of them will live within the same site right here, the parent site. And this is what the HTML code looks like. Okay? We start with this iframe here, okay, and then we say the source of the iframe, which is basically going to denote the site that we want to have in that place. Let's have a look at some examples, some real life examples, so you can see what exactly I'm talking about. The first website that I'm going to show you is this one, which is the Selenium Playground by Lambda Test. Okay, you can go to this website here, lambdatest.com/selenium-playground. So one of the things here that we have are the frames. So let's take a look at here. It says nested frames. I'm going to click on this. This is a very simple page. Notice that we have kind of like different sections on this site right here. We have a top section right here. Then we have these three bottom sections right here. But let's take a look at the HTML code here. So we're going to inspect this here. So here we have the frame set. We have two frames inside of that. Okay, the first frame is this top section over here. Then we have another frame which contains three bottom sections right here. So if I expand, let me expand the bottom section. Okay, and you will see the document. I'm going to expand that, HTML. We have another frame set right here. So what this means is that we have a set of frames inside of this bottom frame right here. Okay, essentially we have three different frames here. So let me expand this. You can see here, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to write a test that is basically going to find this text that says middle right here. Then we're going to find this text that says top right here. Frames are a special type of element because you cannot simply say find the text that says middle. Before we can interact with the frame or any text inside of that frame, we have to switch to it. Essentially, we need to find a selector for that frame, and then switch to the frame, and then perform the action of looking up the text inside of that frame. You can think of this as the different compartments within this website. You know, from the automation perspective, before we can interact with any element on this page, we need to first make sure that we're on the correct frame. If we try to, for example, locate the middle text right here, we're not going to be able to find it. It's going to throw up an exception saying that it cannot find the element. Okay, that's because we haven't first switched to the frame so that we can locate the element. But before we move on, I'm going to show you guys the iframes section. Okay, so we're going to go to this website. It's called practice-automation.com. This one is by automateNow. And here we have different things that you can do. Okay, one of them is going to be iframes. Okay, so let me take a look at this iframes right here. I'm going to click on this. And this is what a website with iframes looks like. Okay, notice that we have basically two websites embedded within here. Okay, we see here the Playwright website and we see the Selenium website. Both of these are completely independent of each other. Okay, we can interact with different elements in here. I can click, for example, here, click support. We can see different things. I can go up here and say, for example, documents, right? I can see the documentation. Let's go ahead and inspect this page so that we can see the HTML code. I'm going to go ahead and click inspect right here. We can see here that we have an iframe. Okay, this is the main iframe. We see an ID of iframe 1. All right, if I collapse that, we can see another iframe. So I'm going to scroll down here, and that's for the bottom section, the one for Selenium right here. And you can see the source right here, src, right? We see playwright.dev, selenium.dev. This is also similar to frames, in which you first have to switch to the frame that you want to interact with. If we navigate to this iframes page and we try to click on one of these elements, for example, in this Playwright site, let's say we want to click on this docs link, we won't be able to do it right away unless we first switch to that iframe, and then we can have access to all the elements inside of that iframe. So over here, I have created a new folder called frames. I'm going to expand that, and inside there we have a new spec. It's called frames.spec.js. All right, so I went ahead and started by creating a new test right here, and this one is going to find the text middle in the bottom middle frame. Okay, so let's go back quickly to the website. I'm going to go back to Lambda Test, Selenium Playground, and this is the text that we want to find. Okay, we want to find this text. It's called middle. And remember what I said about frames. We need to switch to the frame that we want to interact with. Okay, so if we look at this at a high level, right, look at the HTML code at a high level, we have two frames right here, okay? The top frame and the bottom frame. We first need to switch to the bottom frame, all right? So we're gonna switch to this frame right here, right? Once we do that, we then going to go ahead and switch to this middle frame right here. Okay, so there's two different switch actions that we need to make. Okay, first we switch to the bottom, and then we switch to the middle frame so that we can retrieve the text inside of that frame right there. All right, so let's go ahead and find that bottom frame first. I'm going to create a constant for the bottom frame here. I'm going to say const bottom frame is equal to browser dot then $, because we want to find that frame. Okay, so let's go ahead and find a locator or selector for that. Okay, so let's go back to the website here, and we need to find the bottom frame. Let's go ahead and this one right here. So we know that the name of this frame is called frame bottom. Okay, so perhaps we can use this name right here. All right, so let's go ahead and grab that, copy this, and we're going to go back to the code. So let's go ahead and add that selector here. We're going to say frame, that we have a frame, which the name of it is equal to bottom frame. All right, so this is what it's going to look like. I need to put this in double quotes so that I don't get any errors here. All right, so we're going to switch to the bottom frame. First we're going to locate that bottom frame, and then we want to switch to it. Okay, so we're going to say again, so we're going to say await browser dot, and this is a special method that we have in WebdriverIO, which is called switch to. Okay, so we're going to say switch to frame. All right, we're going to switch to that given frame. What's the frame that we want to switch to? The bottom frame. All right, so now WebdriverIO will know to turn this attention to that bottom frame right there. But that's not enough. Now we need to switch to the middle frame inside of the bottom frame, right? So let's go ahead and do a similar type of thing here. I'm going to copy this code, kind of reuse it. And now I'm going to call this one, instead of bottom, I'm going to say middle, right? So we're going to look for the middle frame, and here we're going to say middle. All right, let's go back here. And if we look at the middle frame, this one has a name called middle frame. Okay, it's pretty simple. So let's go back. We're going to put that right here, middle frame. All right, so now we are in the bottom middle section of the website, of that web page. All right, once we have that, we want to retrieve the text that's called middle, or we want to make sure that the text middle is found inside of that frame. All right, so let's go ahead and create a variable here. Let's call it let text is equal to await, and we're going to say browser, and we're going to locate that basically that text. Okay, so if we go back here, if we look at this frame, let's click on this text right here. Since this is the only text inside of this section right here, we can just use this body tag right here, and we should be okay with that. Okay, so let's go back, and we're going to say body, locate the body, and we're going to retrieve the text from there. Okay, I'm going to say get text, right? I'm going to get the text. And once we have the text, we want to make sure that the text is matching the word middle. Okay, so we're going to say expect, all right, that the text to be, okay, is going to be middle, right? I want to first comment this out right here. Okay, so I'm only going to switch to the bottom frame, and I'm going to show you that this test is going to fail because when we try to find the text middle in this bottom frame right here, it's not going to find it. Okay, because we haven't switched to the middle frame right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this test on the Lambda test cloud, and I'm going to show you guys what that's going to look like. All right, so I tried to run this test and I noticed that I was getting an error. So I saw that I forgot to put a wait right here, okay, because we're not waiting for this element to show up. So the test is failing. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one more time. And here we have the test running. It's trying to locate the body of that frame right there, and it's not able to find it. Okay, so we see that the test has failed right here. And it says here, can't call get text on element with selector body because element wasn't found. Okay, so it couldn't find the body of that element right there. All right, now that we saw how the test failed there, we're going to uncomment this section so that we can see the test passing, okay? Because we're going to switch to this the frames appropriately, okay? So I need to add a wait here again. All right, let's save everything and run this. I look here, the test is being executed right now, and pretty soon we're going to see all the commands being executed. All right, session has ended, and if you go back here, we're going to see that the test did pass this time. Okay, now that we found this text in the middle here, I want to switch out of this frame and find the text that says top. Now, in order to do this, I need to first switch back to basically the default frame or the parent frame. Okay, so we're going to switch to the parent frame, where everything's inside of, and then we're going to switch to the top frame. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. All right, so let's go back to the code here, and we're going to switch to the default frame. We're going to say await, and then browser dot switch to frame, and you simply need to say null right here. We don't specify the name of any given frame. When we say null, then it knows to switch to the default frame. All right, once we're in the default frame, we're going to then switch to the top frame. All right, so let's go ahead and grab this text right here, this code. We'll put it here, and we're going to call this one top. All right, I'm going to call it top frame. All right, top frame, copy that, put it here. I'm going to change this from middle to top. Okay, so that means I have switched to the top frame, and then I want to verify that the text top is showing up there. So I'm going to grab this text. Let's go ahead and copy this, and we're going to get that. We're going to say text, and we expect this to be top this time. Okay, let's go ahead and save this and give it a run. Yeah, the test already passed, right? So everything is working as expected. Just keep that in mind. You first need to switch to the frame, whatever frame you want to interact with, before you can do anything with anything that's inside of that frame. Next, we're going to take a look at iFrames. All right, so let's walk through the scenario that we're going to automate. Again, we're going to use this website, practice-automation.com, and then the iFrames page. Once we're on this iFrames page, we're going to pay attention to this iframe right here. It's basically the top iframe, which has this website for Playwright. I want to click on this documents right here. I'm going to click on this link. It says docs, and we're going to verify that this text shows up, the installation shows up. That's how I'll know that my test has passed. All right. So what do I need to do? Well, let's inspect the page right here. Okay. We need to find this iframe, right? So I'm going to click on this here. We know that this is the iframe right here, right? This is the top iframe. The name of this iframe, we have an ID. We also have a name, so we can go with either one. And we're going to first switch to this iframe. Then we're going to find this text right here, and this link called docs, and click on it and verify that this installation heading is showing up. All right, so let's go ahead and write this test. I already went ahead and added the skeleton piece of this. Basically, we have a new test that says it should click on a menu item within an iframe. So once again, we're going to practice-automation.com/iframes. Once we're on that site, we're going to switch to the top iframe. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. I can probably just go ahead and copy some of this code right here that we were using before. Let me copy this and reuse it, right? I'm going to say top. I'm going to rename this whole thing. I'm going to say top iframe. And we have a locator for this. This is called ID dash is called iframes-1. All right, so let me copy this, and I'm going to go back here. Okay, we're going to say hashtag iframe1. Okay, this is, remember, this is hashtag is for using the ID, okay, for CSS selector. All right, once we switch to the iframe, we want to locate that text, right? So locate the link that says docs. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a constant here. I'm going to call this one docs is equal to, I'm going to say await, and then we're going to say, we're going to locate that element right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and locate the element. Let's go back to the website, and I'm going to click on this here, element. We have an anchor tag here, which has, I'm going to use this href right here that says docs/intro. So let me go ahead and grab this right here, all this information. Okay, I'm going to grab that, go back over here. I'm going to say that there's an anchor tag with this right here. Okay, href is equal to that right there. Okay, once I have that, then I want to get the actually click on that, right? So we're going to say docs dot click. Call the click method there, right? Once we have clicked on that, we're going to go ahead and verify the title of the page, right? We click on this. Now we want to verify installation. Let's go ahead and click on this. We can see that this is an H1, so this would be pretty easy to find. So let's go over here and verify that text. Again, I'm going to say const. I'm going to call this one title is equal to await, and let's go ahead and locate that element. I'm simply going to use the H1. All right, H1, and we're going to get the text, right? Get text. Right. Once we get the text, we want to do the assertion. We're going to say expect that the title, right, to be, and then we're going to say installation, right? And hopefully we got everything correct. I noticed that the editor added this extra parentheses here, so let's go ahead and remove those. This can be annoying sometimes and cause errors. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save everything here and rerun this test. And before I move on, I noticed that here you guys may have gotten confused where I use browser here before I try to locate the element. It works either way. Okay, sometimes I forget that I don't need to be using this right here. So in fact, I can delete that right there. All right, and we can just locate the element, all right, the same way. All right, so I just executed the test, and here we can see that the test has passed. And that's how easy it is to work with frames and iFrames using WebdriverIO. I hope you had fun learning. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. So in this video, I want to talk to you guys about alerts. And there are different things that we can do with alerts. Typically, you can either accept an alert, dismiss an alert, or get alert text. You can also send text to an alert. And we'll see an example of that in a few minutes here. All right, let's take a look at another thing that we're going to see today, which is going to be windows. All right, so anytime that you're automating something with WebdriverIO, you need to send commands, obviously, to the browser. But what happens when there are multiple windows open? Then the WebDriver needs to know which window it needs to send the commands to. All right, and this is where handling windows is crucial. So we're going to learn how to get the window handles and how to send commands to different windows. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. This right here is the Lambda test Selenium playground. And this page in particular has different JavaScript alerts. All right, so here we have 3 different buttons. Okay, so the first button right here says JavaScript alerts. If we click on this, we see an alert that comes up. All right, and this one just has one button, which is OK. All right, so we can only click on the OK button right there. Notice that I cannot do anything else with the page unless I interact with the alert. Okay, I need to interact with the alert in order to continue my work. All right, so once I hit OK, then I can do other things. I cannot click on this and then click on this after that. Okay, first I need to dismiss this alert. All right, and this is why it's important for us to know how to handle these scenarios, because there will be a point when you will need to interact with an alert or dismiss an alert. All right, so that's the first example. Then we have another one here which has a confirm box. We click on this, and this one has 2 buttons. All right, so it has OK and cancel. And depending on the button that I click, you'll notice down here there's some text. So if I click cancel, it says here you press cancel. All right. The third one here is another one that has an input field. Let's say I enter my name here, Marco, and I press OK. Then we'll see here you have entered Marco. All right. So we'll automate one of these scenarios. We're going to pick this middle one right here. We're going to click on this button. Then we're going to click either OK or cancel and verify or make an assertion that this text shows up or the correct text shows up. All right, let's go to that first example. And here we have the outline of what this test is going to do. Basically, I created a new spec file here called alerts.spec.js. And this is the test that we're going to write. Okay, first, we're going to navigate to that Lambda test playground, the JavaScript alerts demo page. And then we're going to find the second button that says click me. We're going to click that button, and we're going to then click the cancel button on the alert. Okay. And lastly, we're going to make an assertion that this text right here, you pressed cancel, shows up on the page, just like we saw in the previous example that I showed you. All right, so let's go ahead and first start with this section right here. We're going to go ahead and find the button, and then we're going to click on that button. I'm going to create a constant here, and I'm going to call it second click me button. Then we're going to say await, and we're going to locate the button now. And the selector that I'm going to be using is this one here, right? It's going to be this XPath selector, which is a button that has the text called click me, and it is the second of those because we know there are 3 of them. So we're going to be clicking the second one. Once we locate the button, we're going to go ahead and click on that. So here we'll say await second click me button dot click. After this, what I want to do is to pause the test for a couple of seconds so that I can see the alert showing up. Okay, this is just for testing purposes. We normally would not do this, but since I'm demoing this to you guys, I'm going to go ahead and put a pause here of 3 seconds so that we can see the alert. I'm going to say await browser.pause, and here we're going to pass the milliseconds. So let's go ahead and go with 3000 here. All right. So once we do that, we should be able to see the alert. Then we're going to click on the cancel button. All right. So that's the next step here. All right. So our test is doing the following so far. It comes to this page, then it finds this second button right here and it clicks it, right? And then we see this alert right here, right? We want to click cancel. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we don't need to find a locator for this right here. Okay. If we right click on this, I'm right clicking on this buttons right here. Even if I click on this anywhere on this alert or the page itself, I cannot get to the inspection of the page. In other words, I won't be able to find a locator for this buttons right here. So what I'm going to do is to simply use the built-in commands that WebdriverIO has to handle this alert. All right. So let's go back to the code. And here we're going to say await, and we're going to call browser. Okay, browser that. And one of the things that we can do here, if you're not sure what command to use, I'm just going to type alert here, alert. And notice that I have accept alert right here. So I don't want to do that. I want to actually dismiss an alert. So I'm going to go ahead and say dismiss alert right here, this command right here. So I'm going to click on that. And what that's going to do is to click on that cancel button. All right. The accept command will click on the OK button, and the dismiss command will click on the cancel button. And next, I'm going to do another wait right here so that I can see that text that is going to show up that says that I clicked the cancel button. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add another wait right here. All right, another pause. After we do that, again, we should be able to see that message that says you've clicked the cancel button. So let's go ahead and make an assertion for that. All right, so we're going to inspect this text right here that says you press cancel. We see that there's an ID called confirm demo. So we're going to use that information to locate that text or that element and retrieve its text. So we're going to create a constant here. We're going to call it result text is equal to, then we're going to say await here and locate that element. Here is our selector. And lastly, we're going to say get the text for this element. All right. Once we have the text, we're going to verify the text. All right. So let's go ahead and say expect result text. And we say dot to be. And then here we're going to put the text. So let's go back over here. We're going to grab this text right here, copy it, and let's go ahead and paste it here. All right, and that's all we need. All right, so the test is complete. Now we're going to go ahead and run it, and hopefully we'll get to see the text that we need. Okay, so here I have the test executing on Lambda test, and here we can see that it's showing the video. So let's go ahead and maximize this. We see that it clicks the button, we see the alert, it presses cancel, and here we see the text. And hopefully this test will pass. All right, so the test is done. If you go back to the code, we can see that the test has passed. So in this next scenario here that we have, is talking about different windows, having multiple windows open at the same time. Most of the time, let's say 99% of the time, you're dealing with a single window, right? When we're writing an automation script. Now, this is another example in the Lambda test playground in which we have different buttons right here. Let's say I click on this button that says follow on Twitter. Notice that a new window has opened now, right? If I close this window, let's click on this other button, we get a new window that opens up. Now let's talk about how WebDriver works. All right, so when you're sending commands through WebDriver, it typically sends the commands to the main window. What does that mean? Well, the main window is this original window over here. Whatever happens to be the first window that opens up, that is the main window. All right. Any new windows that open up, right? You have to switch references. In other words, you have to tell WebDriver, now I want to switch windows. Any commands that you send need to be going to this other window. All right. So we need to tell WebDriver to switch to a new window. All right. So in this case, let's say that I'm working over here and I say, click on this button that says follow on Facebook. All right. If I click on this button and then any new commands that I send, even though a new window opened up, they're still being sent to the old window. All right. So for example, if I want to enter a username or password here, I won't be able to enter it until I switch to this new window right here. And that's what we're going to do. All right. We're going to write a test that goes to this page, clicks on this Facebook button, and then checks that we are on this page right here, that we see this text, see more on Facebook. All right. So that's how we're going to be able to tell that the test has passed by looking at this text right here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that test. And what I've done here is created a new spec file called windows.spec.js. All right. And this is my test right here. Notice that I've already started working on this test, right? This is a little bit of a lengthy test. So I went ahead and started it. And basically, we're going to be doing the following. Click and verify that like us on Facebook button functionality is working. All right. So this is the URL that we're going to go to. Then we're going to do this right here. Find the like us on Facebook button and click it. So this is what we're doing here. We're finding the Facebook button using this locator right here. And then we're going to click that button. Once we click that button, we know that a new window has opened up, all right? And we need to switch to that new window to verify some text on it. So here's how we do that. First, we need to get the current window handle. That is the main window, right? Anytime we talk about window handles, it's basically the windows that are open, all right? And this is the current window handle is the first window that opens up. So here I'm saying the main window handle, all right? And I'm saying browser that get window handle, all right? So when I call this command, it's going to return the handle for the window that is currently open, all right? Not the newly opened window, right? The first window that opened up, all right? Then I'm going to wait for there to be more than one window, all right? So this part right here, right? After I click that Facebook button, I expect a new window to open, all right? So at that point, there will be two windows open, all right? So that's right. That's why in here, I'm going to be waiting for up to 5 seconds for that second window to open, all right? This is key right here. It says browser that get window handles, right? So when this one has the letter S at the end, get window handles, basically going to get all the windows that are open. It's going to tell you how many windows are open. And I'm waiting for that to be more than one. So I expect there to be multiple windows, so it needs to be more than one right here, right? If that doesn't happen within 5 seconds, then we're going to see this error message right here. Once we have done that, we waited for the new window to open up. We say get all the window handles. So in this part right here, what I'm doing is storing this in a variable, right? All window handles. I'm saying browser that get window handles, and I'm going to basically store how many windows are open, right? So I should have 2 here, right? I should have 2 windows in this variable right here. Then I'm going to switch to the newly open window, right? This should be the second window handle, all right? So remember what I said, the first window that opens, right? That's your first window handle or the main window handle, right? Any new windows will become the next window or the second window, right? So here we're saying new window handle equals all window handles that find handle, right? Where the handle is not equal to the main window. So what I'm saying here is that I want to find the window that doesn't match the original window, right? I want to find the window handle that doesn't match the original window. In that case would be the next window that opened up, right? The new window, the new Facebook window that opened up. Once I find that, I'm going to use this command here that says switch to window. So I'm going to be switching to that new window that opened up. All right. So this is how this works. Next, we're going to wait for the Facebook page to load and verify that see more on Facebook, this text right here is present on that. And this is where we are so far. We've clicked on this button. We have this new window here. This will be the second window handle. We're going to switch to this window. Now we need to locate this text right here and verify that it's present. So here we're going to go ahead and say const see more text is equal to await. And let's go ahead and find a locator for this. And the locator that I found for this is this one right here. It's basically a span that has this text, right? See more on Facebook. Once we have this here, we're just going to wait for that to show up on the screen, okay? So we're going to say await see more text dot wait for displayed, all right? And how long do we want to wait? Let's just say 5 seconds, all right? It shouldn't take that long, but we're going to go ahead 5 seconds. Then we're going to write an assertion here where we assert that the see more on Facebook text is displayed, right? So here we're just waiting for it. We're going to wait for up to 5 seconds, and we're going to make the actual assertion. So here we're going to say expect, and then await, see more text dot is displayed. All right, so this is what we want right here. And we're going to say dot to be, and we want it to be true. Right, so we want that to be displayed. And just for testing purposes, we're going to add a pause here. So we're going to say await browser dot pause, and we're going to pause for 3 seconds, just so that we can see the window opening up, right? And lastly, we're going to close that window. All right, so let's go ahead and close the window. So to close the window, we say await browser dot, and there's a special command called close window. All right, so we call that command, and that's going to close whatever window has the attention of the WebDriver at that point. All right, in this case, it would be the Facebook window. Once we close the window, I want to add another pause here of 3 seconds. Let me go ahead and copy this text right here and paste it here, just so that I can see the window opening and closing, in the replay of this test. And lastly, I want to show you guys how to switch back to the original window. Even though we close this window, we still should switch back to the original window in case we want to send any new commands to it. All right, so we're going to say await browser dot switch to window, and we know it's going to be the main window, right? The main window handle. And line 30, where we are waiting for something to be displayed, we need to set this up right here as a timeout. So it's going to look something like this. It says timeout, and then whatever that timeout you want it to be. All right, so I went ahead and run this test, and here we can see the recording of it. Let me go ahead and make this larger. We see that it navigates to this page right here. All right, let me go back, click play. It's going to click on the like Facebook button right there, as you can see right here. All right, clicks on that. We're going to see this new window right here. We verify this text. All right, once it verifies this text, it closes that window and goes back to the original window. All right, so hopefully you learned something new today. Let us know in the comment sections if you have any questions, and stay tuned for more great videos. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. The amount of reporting options that you have with WebdriverIO is astonishing. As of the day of recording, there are 17 different types of reports that we can use in WebdriverIO. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys the 8 most popular type of reports. So buckle up your seatbelts and let's go. So let's see some of the reports that we're going to take a look at today. We have here the Alert Reporter, which is very popular when it comes to HTML reports. It has a very beautiful graphical user interface. We also have other reporters such as Dot Reporter, which doesn't have a graphical user interface, but are still pretty useful. I'm also going to be showing you guys how to use some other less common reporters such as the JSON reporter. And we're also going to take a look at other popular integrations with third-party tools such as TestRail. All right, so enough talking. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first reporter, the Dot Reporter. Here I am on the WebdriverIO documentation page, and we have here the different reporters. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of them here. Here's the dot reporter. All right, so if we click on this, it's pretty simple. This is what the UI looks like. And basically what the dot reporter does is that it shows you a little dot, just like you see here in this image right here. You see these little dots. If you see a green dot, it means that the test has passed. So let's see what we need to do here. It tells us that we need to run this command right here to add the dot reporter dependency to our project. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we're going to go back to the code here. And in this terminal, I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here and go ahead and run it. Let's see what else it says that we need to do. All right, the next thing that we need to do here is to add the dot reporter to the reporter section in the WebdriverIO configuration file. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, let's go back to the code. It looks like the dependency has been added. So let's go ahead and open up the WebdriverIO config file, and we're going to find the reporter section. All right, in this section, we're going to go ahead and put in here in quotes, single quotes, we're going to say dot, right? And that's all you need to do to set up the dot reporter. Now, let me go ahead and run some tests, and I'm going to show you guys the results. All right, so let me go over here. Let me go ahead and save everything. And we're going to say here npm run WDIO. And once the tests are done executing, I'll show you guys what the results look like. And right here, it says dot reporter. And notice that it has these little dots right here. So each dot represents a test, right? So we had 4 dots right here. Those first 4 tests that ran, they passed. And then you have an F, right? So this F is in red, and the F represents that a test has failed. So that's how you can tell at a quick glance how many tests failed, how many tests passed. So that's all the dot reporter does, is gives you a very quick summary of your test execution. Now let's take a look at the next reporter, which is the concise reporter. And the concise reporter is pretty straightforward as well. This documentation says that we need to run this command right here, and we also need to add concise to our reporter list. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this command right here, and we're going to go back to the code, and let's go ahead and run it. All right, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and add the concise reporter here. So all I'm going to do here, instead of deleting this dot reporter, I can leave it there and have both reports show up, the dot and the concise reporter. So I'm simply going to add a comma here and add concise right here. All right, so let's go ahead and save it and run some tests so that I can show you what the difference is between the dot and the concise reporter. Our test execution is complete. And here we're going to scroll up here so we can take a look at what the reports look like. All right, so here we have the dot reporter that we saw earlier. And next we have concise reporter. And notice that it has a nice breakdown of everything that happened during our test execution. This right here says all went well. That means that test passed. Here you have a test that failed, and it tells you, gives you an explanation of what it was expecting, what the error was, etc. And you can see more information here of the other tests that executed. So that's it for the concise reporter. Let's take a look at the expect reporter next. And here we have the spec reporter, and this is what it will look like in the terminal. And down here, we're going to find the command that we need to run to set up spec reporter. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this command. After we run that command, we're going to need to add spec to our reporter list. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. First, we'll run the command to add it as a dependency. While that is running, I'm going to go over here and add the new reporter, right? So I'm going to add a comma here. I'm going to say spec, and I'm going to save everything and run some tests. Once the tests are done, I'm going to come back and show you guys the spec report. My tests are done executing now. Let me show you the report. Here we have the 6 tests passed, 1 failed once again. I'm going to scroll up here to where it says spec reporter. And notice that we have the first thing here, which is basically, this is going to break down your different spec files, right? So right here, these are my different folders. I have something for alerts, frames, etc. The first one here that we see is called windows.spec.js. All right, so the windows.spec.js is this one over here. All right, windows.spec.js. And we can see here that the test passed right here. All right, and the same thing for the following spec files right here. We do have one failure right here on this spec file, frames.spec.js. And we can see here what happened. Basically, it was looking for this and it didn't find it. Instead, it found this over here. All right, so that's what it does right here. Basically showing you guys spec by spec what test passed, what test failed. The next reporter that I want to show you guys is this one called JSON reporter. The JSON reporter gives you more control as far as customizing or creating your own reports. It will basically create a JSON file for you to use for whatever purpose you wish. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do here is to run this command to add the JSON reporter dependency. Then we have 3 different options that we can use. The first option that we have here is to have the JSON information be presented in the terminal. Okay, this is what the stdout equals true here, but that's what that does. The next option that you have here is to have the results in a file, right? So we can specify a given file here, a directory, so that we can have the file stored there. And the last one here is to have the result in a file with a custom file name. All right, so I'm going to show you guys these 2 options right here, so you can take a look at that. And lastly, I want to mention here that it's going to create, if we choose, for example, to create a JSON file, it's going to generate a JSON file for each test execution. In order to merge all these files into a single report, you're going to need to add some custom code in here. All right, so this information listed here for your reference. I won't be showing that in this video, but I wanted to make you aware of it so that you can do that later on. All right, so let's go up here. Let's go ahead and copy this code and let's run that. All right, so let me paste it in here and run that. The next thing that I'm going to do here is going to copy this right here. All right, and then I'm going to go back. Let me go ahead and delete all these other reports for now, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this one right there. All right, so this, what it's going to do is going to execute the test, whatever test I have, and show me the results within this terminal here. Let's go ahead and do that. So my tests are done running, and as you can see here, we have a lot of JSON information right here. Let me scroll up. So here we have the JSON reporter, and this is all of the JSON information from our test execution. This is probably not as useful. So what I'm going to show you next is how to put all of this into a file. So let's go back over here, and we're going to take a look at this, which says to create an output directory. Let me just go ahead and copy all of this right here, and let's go back to the code up here, and we're going to paste it right in there. All right. Now that we've done that, when we run our test, it's going to create an output file which has all of the JSON data in this folder right here called results. Let me go ahead and rerun this. So my tests are done executing, and what you're going to notice now is that we have a new folder right here called results. All right. Obviously, you can name this whatever you want. You can actually put it wherever you want. This is just saying that it's going to be in the current directory in the results folder, right? If one doesn't exist, it's going to create it. All right, so assuming that you want it here, you're going to find this results folder, and inside of it, you're going to find all of the JSON files, right? For each of the tests that ran. So I have 7 tests, so I have 7 files right here. All right, so if I click on any of these files, you're going to notice that all I have inside there is the same JSON data that we saw earlier, right? And in here, you're going to have when the test ran, when it ended, how long it took to run, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't want to have this individual reports, which you probably don't, and you want to create a single report, a single JSON file, there is some customization that you can do, as I showed you earlier in the website. So just make note of that if you want to create a single report. The next reporter that I want to show you guys is this one, the HTML reporter. All right, this one here, it's a third-party package, and there's a GitHub link right here to the GitHub project. And in here, you're going to find some sample code that you can use. And we also have here the NPM link for it right here. All right, so if we take a look at it here, it just says that we need to essentially just add this code right here or something similar to this. We're going to be using some of it. I already have some code that I'm ready to use. One thing to note here is that this reporter does not aggregate all the reports. In other words, it's going to create a separate report for each test suite that you have. All right, so here's some code that you can use for that. We're not going to get into these details right now, but just keep this in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and install this. I'm going to head over to the npm area. One thing that I noticed here is that when I try to use the latest version, you go here to the versions area, 8.1.7 is the latest. That didn't seem to work for me, so I went down to the 8.1.6, and that did provide the report for me. So just keep that in mind. In case the report doesn't come out when you're using the latest version, you may want to try one of the earlier versions to see how that's going. All right. So I'm going to use 1.6. So let's go ahead and install this one, 1.6. I'm just going to copy this right here. I'm going to need that and go back to the code here. And I'm going to type in npm I for install. And then I'm going to put that in there. And we're going to say at 8.1.6. That's the version that we want. And then we're going to save this as a Dave dependency. All right, let's go ahead and hit enter here. And the next thing that I need to do is to add the code to the reporter array right here. So let me go ahead and grab that and paste it in here. So let's walk through this code here. So this is necessary right here. We need to say html-nice, and then we can provide an output directory. In my case, I want to put it under results folder in the current working directory. The file name that I want to use, this is arbitrary. I've named it html-report.html. As long as you have the .html, you're good to go. And I'm going to change the report title to my cool HTML report. All right, so that's all we need to get this set up. Let me go ahead and run some tests, and I'll show you guys what the report looks like. My tests are done executing, and now you're going to see that there's a new folder here that was created, results. So let's go ahead and expand that. You notice in here that we have both HTML and some JSON files as well. The one we're going to look at is these HTML files. That's where the report is. The thing that you will notice here is that there's multiple HTML files. The reason for that is, like, as I explained earlier, this reporter creates by default a separate HTML file for each of the test suites. So if I have here 7 suites, right here, we have, for example, alerts.spec.js. So it's basically creating a different file for each one of these suites that ran, all right? Each one of those spec files that ran. That's why you see 7 here. Just remember what I said earlier, there's some custom code that you can use. Just refer to the website in order to generate a single report, basically compile all of these into a single report. All right, so I'm going to show you guys the results here. Let's open up one of these. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go here to open in default browser. Before I do that, let me show you something. In case you don't see this option to open in default browser, there's an extension that you can use. So you can go here to the extensions area and click on that. And you're going to search for this extension called Open in Browser. All right, so this extension is the one that's going to allow you to open HTML files within VS Code. All right, so just go ahead and install that in case you don't have it yet. So I already have it. So I'm going to go back over here and open up this report, right click and open in default browser. And here you can see the report that was generated. It has my custom text right here for the title. And we can see here, I didn't specify a browser, but that's another option that you can add in there. And here you can see when it started, when it ended, how long it took to run, right? The test suite. And we can see more information as far as how many tests passed and failed, etc. This is the spec file that ran in this case. And we can see more information about the test in here. And that's it for the HTML reporter. As you guys can see, it is very different from compared to the one that we're looking at the terminal in the terminal, like the dot reporter or the spec reporter. This is a much nicer GUI that you have here with this HTML layout. And before I close on this HTML reporter, I wanted to refer you guys to this great article by Lambda Task. It's called How to Generate HTML Reports with WebdriverIO. You can learn more at this URL right here. And basically right here, you're going to find a lot of information on different configurations that you can do with the HTML reporter. If we click on this link right here, you're going to see all the tutorials or all of the info that you need in order to customize the reporter even further. The next reporter that we're going to look at is the alert reporter. This is perhaps one of my favorite reporters out there. And this one here is by Alert. And if we click on this here, it's going to take us to this website, the Alert website. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see better. This is what the UI looks like for this is an HTML-based report, by the way. And here we have different information on how to set it up. This is supported by different frameworks. As you can see here, it has a lot of support across the board, not just WebdriverIO, but other testing frameworks, as you can see right here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started installing this reporter. And I'm going to show you guys how to look at the reports in this alert reporter. And let us begin by installing the reporter here. Okay, we're going to add this dependency. Let's go ahead and copy that, go to the code and paste that in here. All right. Once that's done, let's go to the reports array and we're going to add this new reporter right in here. All right, so the information that we need here is going to look something like this. We have here the alert reporter, and you can specify an output directory. There is no need to say // like this, by the way. It automatically knows where to put this alert results or whatever you want to name that folder. It's going to add it to your default directory right here, all right, or to your root directory. All right, so once we have that set up, I'm going to go ahead and run some tests once again, and we're going to take a look at the new reports. The tests are done executing, and notice that we have a new folder here called alert results. Let me go ahead and expand this. You'll notice that all that we have in here is a bunch of text files. We have some JSON files as well. All right, so your report is not ready yet. We need to run one more command to generate the report from all of this information that is listed in these files. All right, so let me go ahead and collapse this once again. We're going to go back to the website, and we're going to see in here the command that we need. All right, let me actually go back to alert. We're going to find the command, which is this one right here, generate a report. All right, we need to run this command, alert serve alert results. Let me go ahead and copy this, go back in here and run that right here. All right. So my report is being generated and we have it right here. All right, so here's the alert report. You can see a very nice UI. You can see the percentage of the tests that passed, that failed, or broken tests, etc. Here we have this different suites that ran. All right, we can show all the suites right here. Right, if I go back here to overview, this is the navigation menu on the left, by the way. And we see different categories. You can highly customize this report. This is highly customizable report. You can enter a lot of information in here, such as screenshots, logs, and many other things. All right, let's take a look at some other tabs right here. For example, the categories tab. This is just going to show you, for example, product defects. We can see here that there's one test that failed right here. And we can see more information, right? The expected, the actual, right? Let's see what else we got here. Test defects. We got another one right here. Clicking on this element. Here's my test suites. We have some graphs, very nice graphs right here. Right. Here's my timeline, basically showing me how long my test took to execute in milliseconds. You can see down here, and other stuff right here. For example, behavior information and packages. Right. The bottom line here is that alert reports is a very good option if you want to have a highly customizable HTML report. And here we have the next reporter that we're going to take a look at. This is Report Portal Reporter. Let's see what this is all about. I'm going to click on this right here to go to the home page for Report Portal. It says here that this is an AI-powered test automation dashboard. And this is open source. And there's different options for you to install this. Let's have a look at the documentation now. I'm going to click on Learn and click on Documentation. And down here, you're going to see the installation steps. Notice that we have different options for installing Report Portal. So we have here hardware requirements. So you can take a look at those, which we can see right here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. All right. And if you look through here, you're going to learn more about the requirements that you will need for this. We also have the option to install this with Docker, without Docker, with Kubernetes, with Google Cloud Marketplace, Minikube, as well as Linux, Ubuntu OS system. All right, so with our setup, we're going to use Docker. All right, I'm going to show you guys how to use this using Docker. Let's go ahead and first, I'm going to click on this right here. It says here that I need to have Docker as well as Docker Compose. As you may know, Docker allows you to run a single container, while Docker Compose allows you to use multiple containers and be controlled as if it were one. So if I just click on this first one here that says Docker, it's going to take me here. I'm on Windows right now, and it says that I can download the Docker desktop. So the Docker desktop includes Docker Compose. All right, so you get Docker as well as Docker Compose. So all we need to do is click on this and download it. So if you don't have this installed yet, just go ahead and download it. and run the executable. Let's see what else we need to do here. Let me close this out. The next step that you will need to do here is says to download the latest report portal Docker Compose file from here. All right, so let's click on this right here. And this takes us to this GitHub repo, which is for report portal. And this is indeed the Docker Compose YAML file. And what I'm going to do is here is to click on this right here that says download raw file. All right, I can click on that and download that file, save it anywhere you want on your computer. And let me just show you guys where I put that file. I have a special folder here called Docker under automation. You can put this anywhere you want in your system. So basically this is the file that you need, the Docker Compose .yaml file. I'm going to go ahead and open up this file so you guys can see what it looks like. And right here is this Docker Compose file. And notice that there's a lot of information in here. There are a few things that I'm going to draw your attention to here in a little bit. And one of them is specifying the port number that you want to use in order to use the report portal. This file also has some credentials that we're going to need in order to log into report portal, which I'll show you as well in a second. For now, let's go back to the website that we were looking at earlier. And it says that we need to run this right here, which is Docker Compose -p report portal app -d /recreate. So this is the command that we need to run. But before I run this command, I want to show you one more thing that we need to do. And that is to add the report portal dependency in our project. All right, so let's go back over here. We're going to go to products and go to installation. And if we scroll down here, I'm going to find this section right here that deals with integrating with test framework. Okay, in our case, we're using JavaScript and WebdriverIO, this one right here. Okay, so this one basically is going to tell us what we need to do in order to add the dependency. All right, I suggest that you follow this instructions that I'm about to give you instead of reading this documentation here in the WebdriverIO website. Okay, this one has a different way of doing it, which is using this right here. But like I said, I recommend that you follow these other instructions that I'm about to give you. So let me go back over here and right here, right? This is where we're going to be using right here, report portal agent, JavaScript, WebdriverIO. So this is a WebdriverIO specific dependency that we're going to use. So let's just go ahead and grab this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And now let me go back to my project and I'm going to use this terminal and type in npm install. And then I'm going to type paste that in there. And then we're going to say -- save dev. We're going to save it as a dev dependency. All right, let's go ahead and hit enter. And that's going to install that. So that is done. So at this point, you should have done three things. And that is to get this Docker Compose .yaml file for report portal. You should have also downloaded and installed Docker. And lastly, you should have added this dependency that we just added for the report portal. By default, report portal uses port number 8080. If for whatever reason you're running something else on your computer that's using up that port, for example, Jenkins is a typical example, you may want to change that port number. In my case, I needed to do that. So let me show you something in this Docker Compose file. I'm going to search for port here. And there is a port section right here under gateway. All right. So in this port section, you have, you're going to see something that says 8080:8080. In my case, I changed this 8080 to 8090. Okay. So my port number is going to be 8090. So just to be clear, the number that you want to change is this one right here on the left. You're going to leave the one on the right the way it is. Right. This is the one that you need to change. Just change this to whatever port number you want to use. In my case, I'm using 8090. So I made my change and I saved everything. Now I'm going to go to the location where I downloaded this file, where I put this file, this Docker Compose. So I'm going to go over there and I'm going to open up a terminal. In this case, I'm going to click on this since I'm on Windows and I'm going to say cmd and press enter. All right. And there is a command that I'm going to need to run here. Let's go ahead and find that command. And we're going to go back to the website here. This is the report portal website, right? Where we're looking at the deployment with Docker. This is going to tell you the command that you need to run, right? So let me go ahead and copy this one right here. Now that we copy this command, we're going to go back to the terminal and we're going to paste that in here. And before I run this, make sure that you have Docker running, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and run Docker. And right here, this is what you should be looking at right now, all right? Your Docker should be running and there should be no containers running at this time, all right? So it's going to look blank right now. Now, let me go ahead and execute this. And I'm going to put this windows side by side so you guys can see what happens when we run that command. Let me move this over here, and then I'm going to press enter. And here we see the containers being spun up, and you can start seeing some action right here. Okay, so the process has finished. You can see here, everything says started or healthy. That's another way, created as well. All right, so let's go back to Docker. And here we have the report portal, which has this option right here. You're going to notice that there's something that says it's going to have this little icon right here for you to launch it. Okay, localhost, and then whatever port number you're specified in the YAML file, in the Docker Compose YAML file. I'm just going to click on this. And what you're going to see is this UI right here. All right. This UI is similar to what we saw when we went over to the website and we went to the report portal website and we said try demo. Okay. This is happening on their system in the cloud, right? So in our case, we're running it locally now, right? So we're not going to be using this. This is a public system that anybody can access. In our case, we're using our own. Okay. So let's go back and go switch over here. So this is the one. And the credentials for this, you're going to find within that Docker Compose YAML file. So let me show you where those are. And for that, I'm going to go back to the YAML file in VS Code right here. So let me go ahead and go over here. And I'm going to do a search. I'm going to say password. Okay, let's go ahead and go here. Right here. So this is the password that you need. This is earbuzz. And notice that it says right here, initial password for the super admin user. So it's telling you what the user is going to be. So super admin is what we need. And this is the password. Okay, so let me copy this password. I'm going to go back to report portal. And here I'm just going to type in super admin. And then I'm going to type in my password down here. And just keep in mind that this default password can be changed. You just need to go into the Docker Compose file and change it there. So you don't have to use the same. It's actually recommended that you update this information, change it to something else. All right, so let's go ahead and log in. And you may see something like this, in where you have all your dashboards. Right now, I don't have any tests that I've run, so that's why everything is clean. Yours should be clean as well. There should be nothing executed. You can see here launches. This is when you execute tests, and you'll be able to see the test results here. So now we're ready to go. We have Docker set up, and we have report portal running on Docker. And all we need to do now is to finish our configuration within our project and run some tests so that we can actually analyze the test results within report portal. And for that, we're going to go back to this dependency right here that we talked about earlier, the agent-js.WebdriverIO. And here we're going to find the instructions that we need for this to work properly. So this is the configuration that you're going to need. At least it's going to look something like this. Let me show you guys what I have already done in my project. So let me go back over here. And this is in WebdriverIO config file. You're going to notice here that I have this information right here. Okay, so you're going to need to have first the import. Right here, we're going to need to have import. You can call this whatever you want. I've called it reporter. And then from, and then this information right here. Next, you're going to need to have this configuration for the report portal reporter. The first thing is the API key, right? Let's take a look at where the API key is going to be, right? This is not going to be the same for you. This is the one that I've created for myself. So let's go back to report portal instance that we have set up. So let me go back over here. And you're going to go down here to the profile section right here. I'm going to click on that. And then you're going to click on profile. Okay, this is going to bring up this screen right here, right? Then you're going to go to right here where it says API keys. And you may not see anything here. It should be blank for you. You're going to click on this thing that says generate API key. Okay, when you click on this, you're going to enter, you can give it whatever name you want, and then it's going to give you the API key. You're going to need to copy that and save it somewhere so that you don't lose it, because you're only going to see it once. All right, so once you've created the API key and you've got that, you're going to go back to the project and you're going to enter that here where it says API key. You put that inside single quotes. The next item that we have here is the endpoint. Notice that I have here a URL, which is a local host, and then a port 8090. Again, this port number comes from the Docker Compose file. By default, it's going to be 8080. Okay, so you may not need to change this to 8090. It should just be 8080. But if you have updated the Docker Compose file to some other port, just make sure you note that here. And we say /API and /v1. The next item is project. This project information, again, is going to come here from the Docker Compose. Okay, if I go back over here to, I'm still here in the user profile. If you click on the project assignment, you see here that there's one project and it's called Super Admin Personal. So whatever name you see here, that's what you're going to enter over here in this config area. Okay, Super Admin _ Personal. The next thing that I have here is the launch. This can be whatever you want it to be. Okay, you can name it whatever you want. In my case, I've just called it my launch. You can also add a description here. I'm just calling it running some tests, right? Once you've done that, then we're going to move on to the next step. So let's go back to the website over here. And it says here that we need to add this thing right here, the reporter and the configuration into the reporters array. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back over here to the project and I'm going to search for my reporters, which is right here. And in my case, it's going to be this information right here, reporter, comma, report portal config. Why have I called this reporter and report portal config? It's because that's what I've declared up here at the beginning of my file right here. I've called this reporter and I've called this report portal config. So whatever those names are, that's what you're going to be entering in this area right here. I know that's a lot of steps, but believe it or not, we're done. We've done everything such that when we run any tests, the test execution results are going to be posted on the report portal. So let's go ahead and run some tests now and see the results in report portal. My tests are done executing now. Let's go back to report portal, and under launches, you're going to click on that. And if it doesn't show anything, there's the refresh button up here that you can click and you're going to see all the results. In my case, I ran 7 tests. That's why you see here 1 to 7. Okay. Don't worry about the numbers here. This is because I've been running a lot of different tests. That's why it says number 77, 76, but you should be seeing number 1 through 7. All right, so right here, if I click on the first one, it says my launch number 77. You're going to see the name of the test, user registration, and I can click through here. You can see what happened, does password validation. That's basically the description that I gave the test. All right, so let's go back to another test. Maybe we'll find another test that failed. Let's see over here. All right, let's find another one that may have failed. And I found a test right here, this one right here that says working with frames. Notice right here, I can see a little bit of the error of what happened, the expected result, the actual result right here. All right, so this is what a typical failure is going to look like. And you can also see here the status of the tests, okay, the start time. So this information, it's good because it tells us what happened during the test execution. But I think it would be even better if we got to see like a screenshot. So let me show you that next, how you can embed a screenshot into this result, into this test report, so you can see what happened during the failure. And we're going to add a little bit more code here in this config file, WebdriverIO config file. Let me go ahead and make some space right here. And I'm going to paste in some code, which I'm going to explain. So basically, this is going to be used to save the screenshots. Okay, we need to import these 2 things right here. Just go ahead and add that code. Next, we're going to add a hook that is going to be executed anytime a test fails. And for that, I'm going to take you down here to our after test. Okay, this after test is going to have some new code in here. I've already added some comments here. Take a screenshot when a test fails. Let me go ahead and paste the code in, and then I'm going to explain it. Let's walk through this code so that we can understand what's happening here. The first thing you'll notice here is that this is only going to be executed when the test does not pass. Okay, that's what we have here, not passed. And we're going to try to basically use the name of the test, whatever the test name is. We're using a regular expression here to remove any white space. And we're going to use that. And we're going to put .png at the end. So that's going to be the name of our file. The screenshot is going to have the name of the test.png. Then we're going to use right here, the screenshot directory is going to be composed of whatever your current working directory is. And then we're going to create a folder called screenshots. Okay, in my case, this is already been done. It's right here called screenshots because I've run this before, but you may not have this initially. Okay, but this is what's going to happen here. And this right here makes sure that the directory gets created in case it doesn't exist already. And then here we construct the full path for the screenshot. Okay, notice that we're joining the screenshot directory with the screenshot name. Okay, so we're going to basically provide this path to this method right here called save screenshot. It's going to save the screenshot in this given directory, the screenshots directory, with the name of the screenshot that we specified. All right. And lastly, we're going to print to the console that the screenshot has been saved, and we're going to give it the name right here. All right. If it fails, we're going to see this error message called failed to save screenshot, and we're going to print the error. There's one last piece of information that we need, because you may be wondering, okay, how is this taking of the screenshot going to put that into the report portal? Well, that's the next piece that we need to add. All right, so let's go ahead and add one more piece of code. So we're going to go up here to the reporters array, and we're going to add, actually not here, we're going to go up here to the configuration area. And over here, we're going to add a piece of code that is going to tell it to append any screenshots to the report. And that option is called attach pictures to logs. And then we say true. And that's all we need in order to attach screenshots. I'm going to go ahead and save everything, and then I'm going to run more tests and show you guys the screenshots. So I'm running more tests right now, and as you can see here, I'm on the report portal dashboard, and I can see that tests are being executed. I'm just waiting for them to finish. My tests are done executing now. I'm going to go ahead and click this refresh button right here to see everything. Now I'm going to find a test that failed, which is this one. I know this test failed. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to click right here. And then notice that I have the failure once again. I'm going to click on this. This is my test name. And I'm going to click on attachments. All right. Attachments will have the screenshot of the test when it failed. If I click on this, we're going to see a larger picture of it. Report Portal is a great tool. I encourage you guys to check out the Report Portal documentation. It has a lot of useful information for you guys to familiarize yourselves with this amazing tool. And before closing, I want to show you guys how to shut everything down, basically how to shut down Docker so that you guys don't have that instance running at all times. So let me go ahead and show you guys over here. Notice that you have these Docker containers right here. You have different options here. For example, I can click on this, each individual one, and hit stop. And you can click on this delete button right here. But the quickest way to do it is to go back to the command prompt. And in here, you're going to basically run the command that says docker compose. And instead of up, we're going to say down right here. Okay. I'm showing you guys right here where it says docker compose -b report portal down. I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to start closing everything down. If I go back to Docker, you're going to see that there's nothing running at this time. Okay, so we made it to the end of the list of reporters that we're going to cover in this video. And the last one is going to be TestRail. I'm sure many of you guys have seen or have used a TestRail product before. And I'm going to show you guys how you can integrate your WebdriverIO tests so that they can be reported on the TestRail platform. So if you don't have an account yet, you can just click on this button that says try for free. And then you're going to fill out all the information right here and then click create an account. Once you've created your account and logged in, you're going to be greeted with a page that looks something like this, okay, where it says all projects. Let's go ahead and begin setting up some configuration items. First, we're going to go to administration. Then we're going to click on settings or site settings. And then we're going to select API. You're going to need to check this box or make sure that this is checked, enable API. This is what is going to allow WebdriverIO to communicate with TestRail. All right, once you do that, you're going to save settings. And next, you're going to go to whatever your name is over here and click on My Settings. Then you're going to go to API keys. We're going to need to create an API key. I already have an API key here, but let me demo it for you. You're going to click on this thing that says Add Key, and then you can give your key whatever name you want. Let's just say Test, and click on Generate Key. This is your API key right here. Make sure you copy that and save it. We're going to be using this later on. All right, I'm just going to cancel for now. The next thing that I'm going to do is to add a project. Okay, let me cancel this. And you have two options here. You can either create a project from scratch by clicking Add Project, or you can add a sample project. If you clicked on this, this is basically going to create a project that has some test cases and milestones and other things in there. In my case, I'm just going to click on Add Project right here to create a project from scratch. I'm going to call my project WDIO, WebdriverIO. And then I'm going to scroll down here and just click Add Project. And there it is. I have my first project, as you can see here. Right now, there is no data. We don't have anything here. How about we add some test cases to this project? So let's go over here to test cases. And I'm going to click on Add Test Case. I'm going to call my test homepage. And here you can fill out this information. We can call this one, this is going to be under test cases. Template, we'll leave it as such. The type, we're going to say automated, and priority, let's just call it low. Now I call this automated, but essentially you can call it whatever you want. You don't have to select automated, but just for sample purposes, I'm calling this automated. Here you would obviously put in your preconditions, steps, and so forth of what you're actually testing. All right, and then we're going to click on add test case. All right, so we have our first test case right here. Let me go ahead and add one more test case. I'm going to click on add another here. I'm going to call this one test login. And I'm just going to select this one as functional, priority, critical, or we're going to call it high. I'm going to leave this blank and click on this. All right, so now I have two test cases. Let me go ahead and click right here that says test cases. And there are my two test cases. And here I am on the documentation page for the test trail reporter. And right here gives you some information on how to use this reporter. All right, the first thing that we're going to do here is to actually add the dev dependency, the test trail reporter. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this code and go back to our code. And here in this terminal, I'm going to enter that information and we're going to run this. All right, and that's going to add that dependency for test trail reporter to our project. Now that that is done, let's see what else we need to do. Let's go back over here. And the next thing that we're going to need to do is to actually use that inside of our config file. And this is what it's going to look like. You're going to need to add this test trail to the reporters array. And it's going to have this information right here. You don't have to have like all of this information, but most of it right here, you need to have that on there. All right. So I already have some of this ready to go. So let me go back to the project and I'm going to enter that in here and then walk you guys through it. All right. So let me close that. And this is the information. Let's walk through each one of these items in here so that you get a good understanding of what this is. Okay. So the first item says project ID. Okay. So where's this coming from? Let's go back to test rail. And the project ID is basically going to be whatever your project name is. So let me go back. Let me take you back to the project that we created, which is WebdriverIO. Notice that this has a number right here. It says P4. Okay. So this P stands for project and 4 is the number of the project. Okay. In my case, I've created several projects already while I was testing. So if you see a 1, which is more likely if you're just getting started, you're going to see a number 1 right here. That's the number that you're going to put into the configuration. All right. So in my case, I'm going to use that number 4. Okay. This is project number 4 for me. All right. So I'm going to go back over here and enter the number 4 right here. Okay. The next thing that we have here is suite ID. And I looked everywhere in the test rail. There are no longer any suites that you can create. You used to be able to create some suites, it looks like, but you can no longer do that. So all I did here is I left this as a number 1. I noticed that if I take this out, if I leave this out, then the report wasn't being generated or the test results weren't being sent to test rail. So just leave this as a 1 right here and you should be okay. The next item here is domain. All right. So domain information is going to be specific to your case. Okay. It's going to have whatever name you used when you created the account. And then it's going to say .testrail.io. That's the only part that's going to be the same as you see here. Okay. If you need to find that information, let me show you where that's going to be. Okay. We're going to go back to testrail over here. We're going to click on administration. And this is where you're going to find the information under the subscription status. Notice that it says right here, automateNow, that's my company, .testrail.io. All right. So just copy that information and put it into this field, into this area right here for your domain. The next item is your username. So whatever username you're using to log in, that's what you're going to put in here. Okay. So if we go back over here to that website and we go over here to my user, I'm going to click my settings. This right here is my username, right? Whatever your email address is. All right. So the next item that we're going to need to do, and just in case you're wondering why I have this process.env test rail, that's just because I'm using that env environment variable already configured so that I can read that environment variable and I don't have to put that information, that sensitive information in here. The next item that we have here is the API token. And remember when we created that API token, and I told you guys to save it, this is where you're going to put that information right here. You're just going to add it right in there. Next, we have the run name. In here, you can call this whatever you want. I've just called it my test run. And you have a couple other options in here that you can leave on there. For example, if you just want a single report, you can set that to true. And this other item here is include all. In case you have any questions on what all this stuff means, you can always refer back to the WebdriverIO documentation. If you go here, you're going to see the different options right here. Okay. So if we look for include all, it says include all tests in suite in test run. Okay. So whatever tests you have in the test suite, they're all going to be included in the report. And we're almost done setting everything up. The last thing that we need to do is to tell WebDriver which tests need to be reported back to TestRail. Okay, so let's go back over here, scroll up. Okay, so remember those test cases that we created? Well, we need to reference those in our test. Okay, so for example, right here, it says this right here, C12345 So this is an actual test case that we're going to be testing against. All right. So let me go back over here to TestRail. We're going to click on dashboard, go to this project right here. I'm going to click on test cases. And these are my test cases. You're going to need these test case IDs right here. So in my case, I have C2312, 2313. So let's say that I want to run an automated test against one of these test cases. All I need to do is to grab this ID right here. And then I would go to my tests. Okay, find a test. For example, let's go to Locators, Locators spec. So let's say this test right here. I want to associate this test with the test case that's on TestRail. All I need to do is this right here, go in here into the description, and then I'm going to add that test case ID. And that's all I need to do. If I run this test right now, it's going to send the test results to TestRail. Let me go ahead and do that. All right, so my test just got done executing right now. It looks like it passed. Let's go back to TestRail to see what it looks like now. So let me go back to the dashboard and we see here WebdriverIO. Let me go ahead and just click on the project name and notice that now we have this little line right here. Okay, it says passed. Okay, so we have one test that passed, and that's WebdriverIO sending the test results over to TestRail. And here we have the test run. I called it my test run. I can click on this one here, and I can see here the test information. It says 50% passed. The reason for that is because I have two tests, okay, but only one got executed. I can see here that this one passed and this one was not tested. What if you wanted to test all of them? In order to do that, we're going to need to grab the test ID for this one right here, okay? Don't grab this ID. Notice that this one starts with a T. This is an actual test execution. We need to go to test cases over here, okay, for the login and find this test login, okay? Let me go to test cases, this test login, all right? It should start with the letter C. That's your test case. So let's copy this ID right here. And then let's go back to the code. And we're going to go over here to this locators spec file. And then you could add it right here. Just put a space and add that right in there. All right. So now this test is going to test two different things on TestRail. It's going to test both of those scenarios in TestRail. If you had a separate test, you could also do that. Okay. You can put C2312 or whatever the test ID is for this test right here. And then find another test and then add the other test ID to that test, okay? But in my case, I'm just gonna show you how to run this scenario against two different test cases. All right, so let's go ahead and rerun that. My test is done executing. For some reason, it failed this time. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look what it looks like now. Let me go back to the project and notice that I have another test run over here, okay? And it still says my test run, but this one is the latest right here. You can also see this in the activity right here. So whatever the latest is, we're going to click on this one here. And it looks like it only one test run in this case. So I forgot to save my changes before I ran the test. So that's the reason why that happened. So I've saved everything. I'm going to rerun it and see what happens this time. I just finished rerunning the test. This time it passed. So let me go ahead and go back over here. And notice now that we have different tests. And over here, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the latest test run. We can see here that both of these tests are marked as passed. And obviously, if you're used to TestRail, you can relabel these. For example, let's say you want to retest this one, would enter information over here about why you need to retest it, etc. I had a lot of fun showing you guys all these different reports for WebdriverIO. Now it's your turn to go out there and start experimenting. Have fun. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. In this video, we're going to be talking about assertions and how to make assertions in WebdriverIO. But more importantly, we're going to discuss why assertions are important. Let's dive in. And here we have a few reasons why assertions are important. Number one is verify functionality. The whole point of testing is to verify some type of functionality, and assertions allow us to do that. We can also catch bugs, right? As a QA engineer, our main job is to make sure that we have a good product free of bugs. We're not always able to achieve 100% of that goal, but we know that with assertions, we're able to find many bugs. Having assertions in our tests also helps us to know that we're delivering a good quality product. That's why we have here ensuring quality. We're making sure that we are testing all the proper things within the program or whatever software we're trying to deliver. Having assertions in your test also improves test reliability. If you didn't have an assertion in your test, you wouldn't really know what's going on, whether the test is properly checking all the things that it's supposed to check. But when the test fails and it has an assertion, we know that that test is reliable. We know that there's a reason why the test failed. Assertions also allow us to document requirements. When you have a test with an assertion, you can pretty much tell what the test is actually doing, what it's actually checking for. Assertions also enhance debugging. And what I mean by that is that when you have a test that fails, you can look at the assertion and pretty much tell why the test failed. For example, it could be that the test was missing some element or it was missing some text in that element. Having assertions also helps us prevent false positives. A false positive is, for example, when a test fails, but it isn't really an issue with the application. If you have the proper assertions, your test will only fail when there is a legitimate error or legitimate issue with the application. Now let's take a look at some of the common assertions. This list right here is not all the assertions that you can make in WebdriverIO, but it is some of the ones that you're more than likely to come across. I'm not going to go through each one of these. Feel free to pause the video so you can read what each one of these does. Next, we're going to take a look at how to use each one of these assertions in WebdriverIO. This is the website that we're going to be using in today's example. This is the Selenium Playground in Lambda test. And some of the things that we're going to do here, for example, is to check that this button is present. There are other things, for example, this title. We can also check these links to make sure that they're having the proper URL that they're going to send the user to when they click on it, and many other things. And the first thing that we're going to do here is to navigate to this website and make sure that the URL is this. So when we land on this page, we're going to check that this website has this given URL. And I've got this spec file right here called assertions.spec.js. This is where we're going to put all of our tests. And I've created this suite right here, which is basically making assertions. This before each hook right here is going to send every test to this URL every time we execute a test. All right, so here we're going to say it checks URL and sync. So by the time this test executes, it comes to the first line right here. This code would have executed already, all right? So we should have gone to this URL right here, lambdatest.com Selenium Playground. Now we're going to make the actual assertion. So here we're going to say await. And the reasons why I'm getting this suggestion right here is because I have GitHub Copilot installed. So this is the reason why I see this. You may not see this suggestion if you don't have Copilot installed. So I'm just going to say expect, then that's what we're going to use. So just remember this keyword here, expect. That is what WebdriverIO uses in order to make assertions. So what are we expecting? We're expecting the browser, right? And I'm just going to hit tab here to fill in the blank to make it faster. Basically, we're going to make sure that this browser has this URL, right? So this is the actual assertion that we're making, okay? This is the method, to have URL. And then you pass in the URL that you want to check for, all right? So we're going to, again, navigate to this URL, and then this is going to expect that that is the actual URL that you're at. Let me go ahead and execute this test so you can see this, that is actually passing. I'm going to save everything. Bring up the terminal and go ahead and call npm run WDIO. And we can see here that this test is actually passing. There's another way to do this, all right? Right here, notice that we're passing in the entire URL, including HTTPS, etc., etc. But what if you just want to check that the URL has, for example, Lambda test in it, right? There's another way to do it. So here I'm just going to say or. And here I can just copy this, for example, and then paste it here. And instead of having this URL right here, I'm going to delete this. And here I'm going to add another expect. I'm going to say expect dot string containing. I'm just going to hit tab right here. This string containing method accepts a parameter here. So here I'm just going to say lambda test. All right. So what I'm checking for in this case is to make sure that the expected URL contains this text in it right here. So as you can see, you have two options of doing it. You can do it like this, providing the entire URL, or you can just check a part of the URL, for example, lambda test. The next example I want to show you guys is to how to check the title of a page. All right, so let me go back to the website for a second. And here we have the website. I'm going to right click, say inspect, and notice that if I expand this, I'm going to make this bigger. Every website has a head tag, also has a body tag. If we look at the head tag, we're going to find a title, right? This right here is the title for this website. Okay, Selenium Grid Online and all this other stuff over here. All right, so we're going to check that this website has this title in it. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right here and bring it down here. And here checks the title of the page. And I'm going to use this bottom one right here. So let me get rid of this stuff over here. And I'm going to say await expect browser to have, but instead of URL, we're going to say title, right? To have title, that one right there. And here we're going to also, instead of putting in the entire title, remember that that one has a pretty long title. So I'm just going to use a keyword here, for example, Selenium, right? So let me look for Selenium over here. So here I'm going to replace this with Selenium. All right. So this is what this is going to do. It's going to go to that website and then check for this title. I went ahead and ran this test for you. And as you can see here, this is also passing. All right, let's move on to the next type of assertion. And for this next assertion, what I want you to do is to go to this website and check for this button. I want to make sure that this book a demo button is actually clickable. Again, let me copy this, paste it down here. Here I'm going to say that it checks that book a demo button is clickable. And I'm going to go ahead and create a constant here. I'm going to say const button is equal to await, and then we're going to locate that button, right? So, and this locator is going to work for us because this is the actual text that shows up on the button. So when you say button equal to book a demo, that's going to locate the button that has that text. All right. And then we want to make sure that the button is clickable. So we're going to update this right here. I'm going to go ahead and say, and instead of browser, we want to check on the button. Okay. So here we're going to say button that to be clickable. All right. So just like that. And that's how you check to see if a button is actually clickable. Next, I want to show you how to check for this text right here. We want to make sure that this Selenium Playground heading is actually showing up. All right. So if we inspect this element right here, we're going to see that this is an H1 tag, which has that text. So that's going to be pretty simple. Let's go ahead and copy this right here and paste it down here. We're going to checks the H1 heading. And in this case, we're going to also have a constant. We're going to call this constant heading. And we're going to say that it is an H1 tag, which has some text called Selenium Playground. And in the next line, we're also going to expect that this heading is displayed. So here we're going to say that to be displayed. Now, let's suppose that we want to make sure that this test fails when it's supposed to fail. Let's replace this Selenium with, for example, WDIO. All right, let's just say WDIO. We're checking for this, making sure that that is displayed, that that text is showing up. Let me go ahead and run this test just to show you guys that this should fail. All right, so let's go ahead and save everything. And I just realized here that I selected the wrong one here. We're not checking to see if it's disabled. We're wanting to check to see if it is displayed. To be displayed. All right, so let's select the correct one. All right, so now this should work. And here we can see that the test has failed. And here we can see the issue. We're looking for an H1 heading that has this text right here. and we're expecting that to be displayed right here, but it's actually not displayed. Well, we know why it's not displayed. That's because the text is wrong. Okay, we've used the wrong text. So I'm just gonna change this back to Selenium. And here we can see the test pass when we provide the correct text right here. The next thing I want to do is to navigate to one of these links right here. We're gonna go to this one that says simple form demo. And then we're going to check that this input box right here is enabled. In other words, that the user can actually go in here and enter some text. So let me go ahead and copy this right here and then paste it and comment that out. Let's go ahead and update this here. We're going to check that input element is enabled. And the first thing that we need to do is to actually go to that page, right? We know that at the beginning, the test is going to navigate to the Selenium playground. Then we need to actually click on that place to go to that simple form. All right, so here we're going to say constant. I'm going to call this one simple form link. And it is this link right here, simple form demo. So if I inspect this element right here, we can see it right here that this is an anchor tag. And it has this text right here. So I'm going to use the anchor tag and then the text to locate the element and click on it. All right, so let me go back over here. We're going to say await an anchor tag, and we're going to say simple form demo. All right, once we have found that, we're going to say await, and then we're going to say simple form demo dot click. Okay, just like that. Now let's inspect the element that we want to check on. All right, so let me go over here, click on that. We want to check this element right here. So I'm going to right click it, inspect. And we can see that this is an input. And let's see, oh, we have an ID right here. It says use user message. So that's the ID that we're going to use for this test. So let's go ahead and go back over here. And we're going to create a constant. Let's say input. And let me just go ahead and approve that. And here we're going to say that the ID is this one right here, okay, user message. And then I'm going to update this assertion right here. I'm going to say that the input, and then I'm going to look for enabled, okay, enabled, to be enabled right here, all right? So once we have that, that's all we need. And that's how simple it is to verify that some element is enabled. In this test, I showed you how to check that something is enabled. Now let's take a look at how to check if something is disabled. All right, so if we go back over here, if we go back to the first page, we're going to click on this one that says checkbox demo. Notice that in here we have several things, right? Several checkboxes. And down here we can see that, for example, this checkbox, there's no way to check them, all right? They're disabled, they're grayed out. We can check this one and this one, right? But not the bottom ones. All right, so I'm going to show you how to check that this box right here is indeed disabled. So again, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to check that a checkbox is disabled. First, we need to navigate to that checkbox page. So let's go back over here. We are going to go back to this page. We can see that right here we have a link, right? We're going to use the link text. We're going to say checkbox demo. So right here, I'm just going to say checkbox demo. And here, I'm just going to say checkbox link, checkbox demo link. And then I want to click on that link. I'm going to copy that, paste it here. So we're going to navigate to that page. Let's go ahead and take a look at the website to see what we want to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on this checkbox demo. And this is the option that we want to click on, right? Or at least check that is disabled. So I'm going to inspect that one. We can see here that it has a it's of type checkbox. This is the class name. So it's going to be a little tricky to locate this element because I'm sure this class name is being used for other checkboxes. Let me just check the first one, for example. And yeah, MR-10 is also being used there. So let me go back down here to the third one. So what we can do here is, for example, is to locate a label that has option 3 as the text. And then we can say select the previous elements, okay, the previous. So for example, the preceding element, in this case would be the input. So that's how we're going to reference this element. So here I'm going to say option 3, and I'm going to replace this here with label equal to option 3. All right, and then I'm going to say dot previous element. And that previous element is going to be an input. And lastly, we're going to say that this right here is disabled, to be disabled. And that's all we need to do there. In the next one, I want to show you how to verify some text, right? Some user input. For example, if I say right here, enter message and I put my name in there, I want to also verify that this text is actually showing up within this input field. And for that scenario, I can repurpose this test that I wrote earlier, where we were just verifying that that input field was enabled. And we're going to use that down here. We're going to check that the input element has a given value. And then down here, we're going to actually enter some text, right? So we're going to locate the element, and then we're going to say await, and then input dot set value. And then, for example, here we can say something like, I love testing. All right, and let's go ahead and add a pause after that. So we're going to say browser dot pause, and we can give it a 2-second pause. The last thing that I would want to do here is to make sure that that value is showing up in that input field. So I'm going to say expect input dot, and then I'm going to say value to have value, and just like that, right? So we're going to verify that this I love testing text is showing up within that input field. This is executing on the Lambda test cloud. So let me go ahead and bring that up over here. I'm going to click on automation, and I'm going to go here. And it looks like the test has already completed execution. So let me go ahead and expand this right here, make it larger. And if I hit play, we're going to see that it navigates to this playground. Then it clicks on the demo, simple demo, and you can see right there the text. I love testing. So let me just back it up. And here we can see the text being shown in the field right here. And when we go back here, we can see that the test has passed. The next one that I want to show you is how to check text on a given element. For example, I want to verify that this element right here has this given text. So in this case, I'm going to look for an H1 element and verify that that element has this text in it. And this was going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to check for the H1 right here, or I'm going to say heading, all right, await. I'm going to look for an H1. And then I'm going to say await, expect that the heading, and then I'm going to type in text right here to have text. Next, I want to show you how to check for attributes in elements. So for example, if I go back over here and I look at one of these elements right here, all these links right here. So for example, checkbox demo again, let's inspect that one. We can see here that this is an anchor tag, and one of the attributes is href. Okay, this href provides the URL that the user is going to be taken to when they click on this link. So we can check, for example, that this element indeed has an href attribute. We can also check that it has an attribute with this value, okay, that this has this URL in that attribute. And I'm going to check that the element has a given attribute. All right, so in this case, we're going to say constant. We're going to say that a link, right? We're going to say await. So here we're going to say that we have an anchor tag with some text equal to checkbox demo. And then we're going to say await, expect that the link, and here we're going to say attribute, right? To have attribute. And what is the attribute that we're looking for? We're looking for href. And this is one way to do it. You're just checking to see that it has that attribute. If I hover over this, notice that we have other options, right? We can actually pass in a value, right? An attribute and a value for that attribute. So here I'm just going to say for, and here I'm just going to copy this right here, paste it down here. Next, we're going to provide a value for that attribute. So this is the URL that I need. I'm going to go ahead and click on it and then grab the URL. And then I'm going to go back to my test and then paste that in here. All right, so this is the URL that should be used for this particular element. The next thing that I want to show you guys is how to check that an element has a given class assigned to it. What I mean by that is, let's take a look at this right here, right? It's Selenium Playground. I'm going to inspect this and notice that this is an H1 element. and I want to verify that this element has a given class assigned to it. In this case, I see that there are 3 different classes for this element, right? The first class is text size -50. The other one is text black and font bold. So I want to verify that the font bold class is assigned to this h1 element. So for that one, I'm just going to copy this right here and reuse it down here. I'm going to say checks that an element has a given class. All right, so we're going to say constant heading h1, then await expected that the heading, and then here we're going to look for class to have element class. And the class that I'm checking for is the one that says text bold. All right, so that's it for that one. The next one that I want to show you guys is how to check for children of an element. So if I look at this over here, right, there's a lot of anchor tags, right, a lot of links. Let me inspect one of these. Notice all these li elements right here, right? So we have an on order list and then a bunch of list items inside of it, right? So I want to make sure that this on order list has children underneath it. In order to locate this on order list, I'm going to use this class right here, this list disk. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so here I'm going to check that an element has child elements. All right, so here we're going to say list, right? And then we said that we want to locate by the class name, which was list disk. And then we're going to expect that this list has children. So I'm just going to say children, right? To have children, like that. And that's how easy it is to do that. And we've covered a lot of ground today. If you're still here, I've got some more for you. The last one I want to show you is how to verify that a checkbox is actually checked. All right, so I'm going to click on this checkbox, and then we're going to click, for example, on this. Click on checkbox. And we're going to verify that this right here, this checkbox is actually checked. And for this test, I'm going to repurpose another test that we wrote earlier. We're just going to comment this. And we're going to check that a checkbox is checked. All right, so again, we're going to go to the checkbox demo page. We're going to click on that link. And when we get there, we're going to actually click on a checkbox. All right, so let me go back to the page. This first checkbox over here, I'm going to inspect this one. And we can see that this is input and it has an ID, right? Is age selected. So we're going to use this ID right here. All right, so here I'm going to say constant first checkbox. And I'm going to say here await. And this is going to be an ID like this. Once we locate that checkbox, we're going to say await. And we'll say first checkbox dot click. I'm going to click on that checkbox. And let's add a pause here. We're going to say await browser dot pause. I'm going to pause for 2 seconds. And lastly, we're going to expect that the first checkbox, and we're going to say here that is checked. Checkbox to be checked. So the test is finished. I'm going to save my work and re-execute this. Then we're going to go back over here. The test. Let me refresh the page. There we can see that the test is executing right now. Let me go ahead and show you guys. And here we can see that the test has executed and it's going to that checkbox. It's checking the box right there. We can see that the box is checked and it also verifies that it's actually checked. So if we go back over here to the IDE, we see that the test has passed. I hope you enjoyed learning about assertions in WebdriverIO. Go check out the WebdriverIO documentation so you can learn about what other assertions are available for you to try. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. All right, so this video is going to be packed with great important information because we're going to be talking about cross-browser testing and cross-platform testing. We're going to discover why these are important and how you're going to benefit by performing these actions. The first one up is going to be cross-browser testing. So let's have a look at what we mean by that. And as you might imagine, cross-browser testing deals with testing your application across different browsers. On the screen, you're seeing different vendors, different browser vendors that are available on the market today. This is just a few. There are others, of course, but you may have users on different type of browsers. So that's why we want to make sure that we're testing the application on different browsers. Let's have a look at some of the benefits that we're going to get by doing this. And the first benefit that we have here is improved compatibility. What this means is that we're ensuring that the application is going to be compatible across the different browsers. We want to make sure that the application behaves as we expect it to in all the different scenarios. For example, if you're on Chrome or Firefox, Safari, etc., you want the application to perform exactly the same as you would expect in every single situation. The next one here is a wider audience reach. So essentially, we're just making sure that every user of our application, whether they're using a Safari or they're using Opera or they're using Microsoft Edge, we want to make sure that they have the same experience with the application no matter what browser they're testing on. The next one here says catches browser-specific bugs. So believe it or not, all browsers are not created equal. You may have an application that performs as you expect it to on, say, Safari. But if you switch to Firefox, for instance, then you'll start noticing some differences and some glitches, or the application is not, behaving as you would expect. So this is what we mean by browser-specific bugs. As you test in different browsers, you're going to discover different things in different browsers. The next one is enhanced user experience. So we want the user to have the best experience possible, no matter which browser they're on. Okay, so you may have a user that likes to use Chrome, for example, or you have another user that's on a Mac and they like to use Safari. You want both of those users to have the same experience without any issues. And the last thing that I have here is supports legacy systems. And what I mean by this is that we have some users that like to use a certain version of a browser or an older version of a browser that isn't necessarily supported by major browser vendors. But for whatever reason, you have a large number of those users using your application. So with this, you want to make sure that you're also testing those versions of browsers so that those users are not left out. Next up is cross-platform testing. And what we mean by this is that we are going to be testing the application across different platforms. For example, different operating system or different type of devices, whether they're mobile or desktop or tablet, etc. Right here I have Linux and Mac OS, Windows, Android. So that's what we mean by this. We're going to be testing the application or running our different test scenarios across different platforms. Let us also have a look at some of the benefits of using cross-platform testing. The first benefit that I have listed here is broader device coverage. So essentially, we want to look at our data and see what type of device the user is on when they're interacting with the application. And then we want to ensure that we're testing those devices. So whether that's a tablet or a mobile device or a desktop, right? We want to cover all those devices. Next one up is consistent performance across platforms. So we want to ensure that the application doesn't have any performance misbehaviors depending on the device that they're on. So for example, someone is using a mobile device. You want to ensure that the performance doesn't change if they were to use a desktop, for example. Next one here I have catches platform-specific bugs. And this is similar to cross-browser testing in the sense that we, instead of testing on different browsers, we're now making sure that no matter what platform they're on, whether they're using a mobile device or a desktop or a tablet, you want to ensure that there are no bugs on those different devices, right? So you may have an application that performs just fine on a desktop, but when you switch to a mobile device, you start having all different kinds of issues and you start noticing little differences. And this is what we mean by that. And we also have here UI consistency. So we want to ensure that the user has the same UI no matter what device they're on. And this is important because not every platform is going to render the application exactly as you would want it to. So we want to get as close to what we want as possible across different platforms. And lastly, here I have accessibility compliance. So of course, we want to make sure that our A11Y requirements are being complied with across different platforms. Now that you know the difference between cross-browser testing and cross-platform testing, let's have a look at how we can implement these two things in WebdriverIO. And first, we're going to take a look at cross-browser testing. And to get started with that, we're going to need to go to the Lambda test website that has the compatibilities generator, or you can just do a Google search on that. So the direct URL is this one, lambdatest.com/compatibilities generator or compatibilities-generator. Once you're on there, you're going to need to select a language. So in our case, we're selecting JavaScript right here, Node.js, and then we're going to select the WebdriverIO for the platform. Okay, we select that, and notice that the information right here is changing as we select different options. Okay, I'm going to leave this tool as Selenium and then Selenium 4 as the latest version. So I'm going to leave that there. And let's walk through these options right here, or these capabilities. And this is what we're going to need to update in the WebdriverIO project. We're going to need to update the config file and more specifically the capabilities section. All right. The first thing here that we see is the browser name. Okay. We're going to specify the different browsers. In our case, we're doing cross-browser testing. So we're going to test on different browsers, for example, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, etc. The next thing here is the browser version. And then here you can specify which version you want to use. And right here is where we select that information. For example, I can say here, instead of Chrome, I can select Firefox. And notice how this got updated to Firefox now. And same thing here with the version. I can select a different version, for example, and it's going to show that information here. Or I could use the word latest right here. And that's going to get me, it's always going to give me the latest version for that specific browser. Right, next up we have the LT options, and this stands for Lambda Test Options. You're going to need to fill this out with your own information. For example, the username and the access key. You're going to replace this text with that information, okay? Then we have the platform name. In our case, we're not doing cross-platform testing yet, so we're going to leave this the same, okay? All of the information is going to look the same for the different browsers, okay? So next, we have the project right here. We can specify a project name. And then this information right here is always going to be the same no matter what. All right. So for example, right here, we can select a project name. So let's give this project a name of WDIO. And notice that this will get updated right here. All right. We can also say an automation project name. Here I can say, for instance, cross browser test. If I go up here to this advanced capabilities, I could select, for example, Windows 11 instead, right here. Okay. So we're going to use Windows 11 for all the different scenarios or the different browsers that we're going to use. And here we can give these tests a name as well. I could say, for example, test 1, 2, 3, etc. Right. And there are other options that you can select right here. All right. But once you have selected your options, you can just click on copy right here and then take that information and paste it into the capabilities section in your config file. So I already completed that. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys what that's going to look like in the config section. All right, so we're going to go to the WebdriverIO config file. And in there, you're going to find this capabilities option right here. So what we're going to do is to go inside of these brackets right here. And I'm going to paste the first capabilities that I have here. All right, so let's walk through this. And what I've said here is that I want to use Chrome as the browser name, okay? And then I want to use the latest version of Chrome available. And these right here are my Lambda test information, my access key, and my username. You know, I'm using a .env file in order to pull that information into the test. And right here I have, for example, the platform name, which is Windows 11. And I've given my build a name. So I've just named it WebdriverIO cross-browser test. I've also named this project WDIO, and the name of this test is going to be Chrome on Windows 11. All right, this information stays the same as I showed you earlier. So this is one browser. Next, I want to add a couple more browsers to have a little bit more coverage. So let me go ahead and put a comma right here to add a new capability. So I'm going to put comma, and then we're going to paste the new capabilities. So I pasted two more. The next one here says Firefox. Okay, so I also want to use the latest version of Firefox. And then this information pretty much stays the same with the exception of this name, which is Firefox on Windows 11. Okay, the next one is Microsoft Edge. And again, I'm using the name of Edge on Windows 11 right here. And this is pretty much all you need to do in order to run your test across different browsers. All right, so what we're going to do next is to save this right now. And we're going to run some tests to see them running on different browsers. So the test that I'm going to run is this one right here that says assertions, spec.js. And this one is basically just going to go to the Lambda test playgrounds, the Selenium playground is and this is going to perform different assertions on that website. All right, so let's go back over here, right? We have all of the different browsers that we want to use, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and execute this. I already specified that I want to use the assertions folder, and I'm going to run the specs files inside of that folder. All right, so all I need to do now is to bring up my terminal and say npm run WebdriverIO. I'm going to kick that off. Now let me go ahead and open up the Lambda test website, and here we see the test being executed. It says WebdriverIO cross-browser test. So let me go ahead and open this up, right? And we see the different tests executing. Right now, I have 2 threads, right? That's the maximum number of threads that I can use. So I'm using both of them. One of them is running Firefox Windows 11. The other one is running Chrome on Windows 11. Once either one of these is done, then the next one is going to kick in, which is going to be the Edge browser. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a minute to finish executing. You can see here on the right, the actions that are taking place as the test is running. All right, and when I click on this, for example, the first one right here, notice that it's going to say here that it took 33 seconds, right? Time that it took to execute. We can see here the browser that we used. This was Firefox. And we also see Windows 11 as the platform. Right, this one here, if I click on it, it changes to Chrome, and it stays as Windows 11. Now it's running Edge. Right, here we see Microsoft Edge. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a minute to finish executing. And once everything's done, I'm going to come back. All of my tests are done executing now, and we can see here how long they took to execute on the different browsers, with Windows 11 Firefox being the fastest and Windows 11 Edge being the slowest. I can even go ahead and click here to expand this, and we're going to be able to see the test in action. Let me go ahead and hit play right here. You can see that it's going to the Lambda test Selenium playground, and it's doing the different interactions and different validations on that website. All right, so let me go ahead and close this up right here. All right, if I go back to the code, we're going to see here that my test execution is complete, and we can see here 3 tests pass. Okay, that means that we run the same set of tests on 3 different browsers. That's why we see 3 right here. Now we know how to do cross-browser testing. Next, let's take a look at how we can do cross-platform testing. So let me scroll back down here to the capabilities section, and I'm going to add a new capability all the way down here. I'm just going to put a comma right here and then paste a new one right here. So the new one that I have here is just for Safari, okay? So I want to use another browser and a new platform, right? So the platform in this case is macOS Sequoia. So I'm specifying the latest version as of today, the day when I'm recording this video. Now I'm going to call this Safari on macOS Sequoia. That's going to be the name of this test. I'm also going to change the build information this time from cross-browser testing. I'm going to call this one cross-platform testing. All right, so I'm going to update this for all the different scenarios. So let me go up here, put it there, and we're going to go up here, put it there. And lastly, we're going to do this one right here for Chrome. Next, let's take a look at the platform that we want to run on. So in this case, we're running Windows 11. So that's fine. Let's leave this as Windows 11. This one, let's also leave it as Windows 11 with Firefox instead of Chrome. And this one, we're going to say Microsoft Edge, but instead of Windows 11, we're going to say Windows 10. Okay, so let's change this to 10. We're going to update the test name right as well. And this one is Safari. And of course, this is going to be on macOS. So at this time, not only are we running our tests on different browsers, but we're also running in them on different platforms. And this is going to give us a lot more test coverage because we're testing different platforms, different OSs. And you can imagine how you can increase this by simply adding new capabilities here to test the different scenarios that you may need. Let me go ahead and save this now. And I'm going to, again, execute this test so that you guys can see it. Let me go back to Lambda test. And here we can see here the new test being executed. The last one we ran was this WebdriverIO cross-browser test. This one is cross-platform test. So let me go ahead and open this up. And here we see Firefox on Windows 11. And we also see Chrome on Windows 11. So we're going to have those two kick off first. And as soon one of these is done executing, we're going to see one of the other ones that are queued up. For example, the one for Safari or the Microsoft Edge, they're going to start running here. And there we see Chrome is done executing. Now we have Edge on Windows 10 being executed. And we also have Safari on macOS Sequoia here. All right, so let me go ahead and open one of these up that is done. For example, the Firefox one on Windows 11, we can see here that indeed the Firefox browser is the one that is opening up. You can see here that looks a lot like the Firefox browser. All right, let me go ahead and close this up. Let's go back to macOS over here. Of course, you can see the information right here, how long it took to run, the type of browser, and the version right here. So if I make this larger here, we can see here what is going on the Safari browser, right? So in this case, we can see that the Safari browser took the least amount of time at 12 seconds, and Firefox on Windows 11 took the longest at 40 seconds. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video learning about cross-browser testing and cross-platform testing. This is a really exciting field for me, and I hope you will enjoy testing different scenarios and different type of devices and different platforms. So go ahead and check it out. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. This video is going to be all about running tests in parallel. Let's have a look at what parallel testing is. Running tests sequentially, one after another, it's slow. It is better to run your tests in parallel. That means running multiple tests at the same time. That's what parallel testing means. Let's just say that you have 10 tests that you need to run. And each one of these tests takes about 6 seconds to run. If you were to run all these tests sequentially, it would take approximately 60 seconds to run all of them. Now, what if you could run all of the tests at once? That means that it would only take about 6 seconds for all of the tests to execute, which means that you're saving about 90% in execution time. Isn't that amazing? And here I have a graphical representation that compares parallel testing to sequential testing. So in sequential testing, we have only one test being executed at a time. Okay, so you click run and you're going to have one test come up and start running. When that test is done executing, another test is going to kick on, and so on until all your tests in your test file or your test suite are finished. Now, when it comes to parallel testing, there is really no limit on how many tests can run concurrently or at the same time. The only limitation is by your resources. In other words, how many CPUs or how many resources you have available to handle the amount of tests that you want to run simultaneously. Now, in this scenario, we have up to 10 tests running at the same time. Okay, so these tests are running in parallel, and at any given time, you can have up to 10 tests running. Now, as soon as any one of these tests is done executing, another one is going to take its place. So in other words, WebdriverIO is going to make sure that up to 10 tests are running at any given time. Of course, this is just a hypothetical scenario. Like I said before, you can have any number of tests depending on your resources that you have available. Now, let's see what WebdriverIO documentation has to say about running tests in parallel. It says that WebdriverIO already tests each spec file or feature file in 𝐭𝐭𝐫𝐿 in parallel within a single session. And what this means is that by default, all of your spec files run in parallel in WebdriverIO. So if you have multiple spec files, those spec files will run in parallel. It also says here that in general, you should try to test only a single feature per spec file. Try not to have too many or too few tests in one file. The max instances is what controls the number of spec files that will run in parallel. And I have a word of caution here because this can be a bit confusing. And it is that by default, WebdriverIO runs your tests within a single spec file sequentially. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you set this max instances to a number greater than 1. If you only have one spec file, that means that those tests inside of that spec file will run sequentially, one after the other. It is only when you have multiple spec files that your tests begin to run in parallel. Now let's have a look at some examples in code. And to begin, I'm going to show you guys this spec file that I have here. Actually, I have a couple of them here. So the first one is called parallel1.spec.js. Let me open this file here. And as you can see, we're navigating to the Lambda test Selenium playground, and then we're making a bunch of assertions here. There's about 6 tests that happen in this spec file. I'm going to open up this other file over here, parallel to that spec.js. And in this file here, we have also a number of tests that are also navigating to the Selenium playground, and they're doing various validations on that website. Now, what I want to do is to run the tests in parallel. So essentially, I'm going to be running both of these spec files simultaneously. All right, so the way we do this is we're going to go to this WebdriverIO config file. Let's open that up, and we're going to look for max instances. And this is where we're going to set how many spec files do we want to run at the same time. Right now it's set to 1, which means only one spec file will run. And all the tests inside of that file will run sequentially, not in parallel. But we want them to run in parallel. We want both of these files to run in parallel. So here I'm going to set this number to 2. Okay, so that's going to allow me to run 2 spec files at once. Now we've set that to 2. I'm going to scroll up here just to show you guys. And the way this is set up is that it goes to tests, parallel folder, and then all of the files inside of there. So both of these spec files will get picked up. Okay, so we have that set up right there. Now all I'm going to do is to save my work here, and then I'm going to run my tests. So here I'm just going to type npm run wdio. Now I'm going to go to the Lambda test website, and here we can see that the tests are running right now. Okay, so I'm going to click on this right here, and I can see here that 2 tests are being executed at the same time. Okay, this is what parallel allows us to do. All right, so it's going to go through all of the tests in each spec file, running 2 tests at a time. And our test execution is complete. If I go back over here to our project, we can see here that 2 tests have passed. Let's go back to the Lambda test website. And here we can see that for the first spec file, it took 16 seconds to run. The second one took 5 seconds to run. And if I click play on one of these right here, we're going to see the tests being executed and performing the different validations. So there you have it. That's how easy it is to run tests in parallel. You may be wondering though, why I've only set this to 2 right here. And this is going to depend on your requirements or your limitations. In my case, I'm only allowed to run 2 tests concurrently on Lambda test. However, you may have a plan that allows you to run 10 or more, or you may have an in-house setup that allows you to run many more tests. So just remember to update this number right here depending on your scenario. In this scenario, I showed you how to run these 2 spec files in parallel. Now, what if you wanted to run the entire suite? In other words, all of the spec files that you have under this test folder right here. In order to do that, we just need to go up here, and instead of having this line right here, I'm just going to delete it and uncomment the line above it. And as you can see here, what we're saying is that we want the test folder, which is this one right here, and then everything under that. That's what this represents right here. Okay, all of the folders under the test folder and all of those spec files that are inside of each of those folders. Now, I could go ahead and run these tests right now and show you guys what it's going to look like. So let me go ahead and do that. First, I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to bring up the terminal, and then we're going to re-execute this. If I go back to Lambda test here, I can see at least 2 spec files being run right here. Okay, they're running simultaneously. Whenever one of these gets done executing, another one's going to kick on, just like this. And this is going to continue until all of the spec files are done executing. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. See you in the next video. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to click an element. It's not the typical click that you may be thinking of. We're going to learn how to click an element given an offset. In other words, we're going to click a certain area of the element. Let's dive in. So how does clicking work in WebdriverIO? When we tell WebdriverIO to click an element, what happens is that it's going to click the middle of the element. That's what this circle right here, this dot in the middle of this element represents. Just imagine that this rectangle right here, it's the element, and the middle section is where the click happens. So you say element.click, and it's going to click exactly in the middle of the element. All right, that area is known as the 0,0 location. Okay, that stands for the X and Y coordinates. All right, so it used to be that clicking would happen here at the top left corner, but things have changed over time, and now the clicking happens right at the middle of the element. And now let's have a look at a hypothetical example. Let's just say that this element right here is 100 pixels across. Okay, that's the width of the element, 100 pixels. So from the left side, right, from the left boundary to the middle of the element, that would be 50 pixels. And then from the middle to the right boundary, that would be another 50 pixels. Okay, so you have 50 pixels to the left and 50 pixels to the right of the center section of the element. Now, this left side over here, it's known as the negative side. Okay, so when we tell WebdriverIO that we want to click the left side of the element, we're going to be passing in a negative value, right? And you're going to see this an example here in a second. And then when we want to click to the right of the center of the element, we pass a positive value. Now, let's say, for example, that you want to click to the right of the center. Okay, so in that case, the first value right here represents the x-axis. In other words, in which direction you want to move from side to side. Okay, and then the other value, this value over here represents the y-axis, or in other words, where you want to go up or down from the center of the element. So in this case, let's just look at this dot right here, this red dot. We have moved 25 pixels from the center. All right, so this is what the 25 represents right here. It's going to go 25 pixels from the center, and then it's going to click right there. Right, we're not going up or down. Right, that's why this element right here, or this value, is staying at 0 for the y-axis. Now, if you want to click to the left of the center, then we pass a negative value. So it's going to look something like this. We'll say negative 25, 0. And that's just saying we're going to go 25 pixels to the left, okay, starting from the center. Let us now have a look at the y-axis. So the same element, now we're looking at this height. Let's just assume that this is 30 pixels, all right? That would mean that if we start from the center, we have 15 pixels going up, and then 15 pixels going down. All right, and again, the middle section, or the middle point, is 0,0. Now, this top section, if you want to go up from the middle, we need to pass in a negative value. Okay, so that's why we say negative 15 in this case right now, right here. Okay, if we want to go down, we pass a positive value, right? So in this scenario, we have 15 pixels going in the negative direction, 15 pixels going in the positive direction. Now, for an example of this, let's just say that we said 0,-7. Okay, that means we're going to stay, we're not going to go anywhere from side to side. That's why the x is 0, but the y is -7. That means we're going to go up because we're passing a negative value. Okay, so we're going to land about halfway between the middle and the upper boundary. Right now, if we want to go down from the middle, then we pass a positive value, and that's going to land us somewhere in the middle as well, between the middle point and the bottom boundary. What if you wanted to click somewhere over here in this direction? Okay, so in that case, we need to move both the x and the y-axis. Let's see what that's going to look like. So we have here 25,7. What just happened here? Well, 25 is the x value. We start from 0 here, 0,0. So we went 25 pixels to the right, starting from the center. So we went in this direction. Then we're passing a positive value for the y-axis. That means we went down, okay, about 7 pixels, and that would land us somewhere in this direction. And now that you have a better understanding of how clicking works in WebdriverIO, you may be still wondering, why would you want to do this? Why would you care where the click happens? You just want to click an element, you don't care where it happens. Well, I would say that 99% of the time, you really don't care where the clicking is going to occur. But there are some scenarios in which you do care, or you would want to have more control and more precision on where you want to click. Let me show you an example of that. And to illustrate my point, we're going to be using this website, which is the Selenium Playground from Lambda Test. Okay, they have a page here called Slider Demo, and it has a bunch of different sliders on here. We're going to use this first slider for the example in this video. All right, look at this, what happens right here. So if I click and hold this, I can move it around, right? And as I'm moving this, notice that this value is changing, right? It has a default value of 5. This is where it began over here, but you can move it around. Another option is to click, right? You can click anywhere on this element. For example, I can click over here and notice that it moved to 97. I can click back over here and it moves to 1. And I'm going to demonstrate how clicking works by using this slider. I'm going to show you how to click the center of the element, clicking to the right of it, clicking to the left of it, or clicking by a certain percentage of the total width of the element. So let's go to the code for this example. So I went ahead and started with some code here. I just created a new spec file called offset_click.spec.js. And in there, I've created this test, which is just going to click an element by a given offset. The first thing that we're going to do is to navigate to that website that has the sliders in it. So this is the URL for that. Next, we need to locate the element that we want to interact with. So let's go back to the website for a moment. And here we have the element that we want to work with, right? Right now, there's different elements, different sliders on here. So let's inspect this first one. And we can see here that this is an input, right? And there's different attributes that we can use right here. I'm leaning to using this value here where the value is 5. That's the default value for that element. If I look at another one, for example, that one right there, that one has a default value of 20. So we're going to use the value to locate this element, okay? So let's go back to the code. And here we're going to create a constant. Let's call it slider. And then we're going to say await, right? And then we're going to say $, rather. And then we're going to say it's going to be an input and then brackets where the value is equal to 5. All right, that's the one that we're interested in, right? That's going to help us locate that element. Once we have that, the first thing that I want to do is to click the element to show you guys what happens when you just say click, right? Let me go back over here. Let me close this, and I'm going to refresh this page. So when we land on this page initially, notice that the value for this is 5, right? So this is the default value for it. And I'm going to send a click operation or a click command to this element. And we're going to see what happens to this when we say click. All right, so let's go back. And now we're going to go down here. We're going to say await. And we're going to say slider dot click. We're not going to pass any parameters to it. All right, that's all we're going to do. And since we want to see the actual click taking place, I want to use a pause over here. I'm going to say await, then browser pause. We're going to pause for, let's wait for 3 seconds right now. All right, so let me go ahead and run this test to show you guys what this is going to look like. So first I'm going to save everything here, bring up the terminal and run this test. I have the test running on Lambda test. We should be coming up here shortly. So once it kicks on, I'm going to show it to you guys. And there it is, click by offset. Let's go ahead and open this up. And here we can see what is going on, right? So the test has finished execution. Now I'm just going to wait for the video to load so I can replay the video and show you guys what the click did. All right, so the video is finished. So let me go ahead and expand it, make it larger. I'm going to click play right here. And notice that it goes to the website. This is the default value right now, 5. Now we're sending the click operation. And notice what happens. It clicked the center of the element. And the value there says 50. So let's go back for a moment here so you guys can see what happens. There. So when we click on the element, notice what happens. It clicked the center of the element. We didn't tell it to go to the left or to the right. We just said click, right? So this proves to us that when we say click, it's clicking the middle of the element. So let me go ahead and close this up and go back to the code. All right, so next I want to go ahead and click to the right of the element. So starting from the middle, I want to click to the right of it. So I'm going to say await, I'm going to say slider dot click. And this time I do want to pass in some parameters. Okay, so here I'm going to use braces, and then we can say X and then colon, and then how many pixels do we want to go to the right? Remember, when we want to go to the right, we need to pass in a positive value. So here we can say, for example, let's say 100 pixels to the right. All right, so that's what we're going to do there. And by the way, we don't need the X axis or the X coordinate. I can actually remove this. Okay. It is assumed that you're not going to be going up or down. So we're going to leave it like that. Just going to pass in the X. We just want to move horizontally. We're not moving up or down. All right. So I'm also going to use another wait right here so that we can see what happens. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. And this time the test should first, land on the page. It's going to click and it's going to show the middle of the element. And then we're going to click somewhere to the right, 100 pixels to the right. So let's go ahead and see that in action. I have the test running now, so let me go back over here and let's go back to the builds. And if we click this, we can see that the test is running right now. And here we're going to see what's happening. All right, the test is done. So let me go ahead and open this up. I'm going to click play. And we're going to see that it's going to navigate to the website. Right there is at 5. We should now see 50. And then it's going to go to the right 50 pixels. So let's see what happens. So it does go to the right. Notice that we were somewhere in the middle, right? We were at the middle actually. And then we went 100 pixels to the right, and that brought us to a value of 71, right? This number right here doesn't necessarily represent the number of pixels. Just remember that this is just a default value from 0 to 100, okay? So just ignore this. What we're doing is like starting from the middle, and then we're saying we want to go 100 pixels to the right from the middle, okay? So that's where we're landing over here. All right, so how about we go to the left, right? Starting from the middle, we want to go to the left 100 pixels. So let's see how we're going to do that. That should be pretty straightforward, right? We're going to go back over here, and I'm going to grab this code. I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to paste it over here. And this time I'm going to add a negative value over here. So negative 100, because I want to go, starting from the middle, I want to go left. Okay, so I need to pass in a negative value. And again, I'm going to put a wait right here, and I'm going to rerun this test to show you guys what happens. The test is done running, so let me go ahead and open it up. We can see here, the starting from the middle, then it's going to go to the right, and then it's going to go to the left. And there we see it right there. Okay, so we went 100 pixels starting from the center. We went 100 pixels to the left. In the last examples that I showed you guys, we were using an exact amount of pixels that we wanted to click by. All right, so we said we wanted to go 100 pixels from the center in either direction, or we went to the right first and then we went to the left. So that assumes that we have at least 100 pixels, right? We don't know exactly how many pixels there are to the right or to the left because we don't know the actual width of the element. So whenever possible, you should try to first get the width of the element so that you know how many pixels you're working with. Otherwise, you're not guaranteed that you're going to be able to click on the elements. Let's say, for example, that you had the same element right here that is 100 pixels across. And you said, I want to click 200 pixels to the right of the center, right? That's not going to work because you're going outside of the element, all right? So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing this type of operations. The next examples that I'm going to show you is how to get the actual width of the elements so that you know where you're starting from or how many pixels you have to work with. All right, so let's have a look at that. We're going to basically use a special method that's going to return the width of the element. It also returns the height, but in this case, we're only working with the width. We want to click on that slider, and all we care about is the width of the element. All right, so let's go ahead and comment this code out right here. And we're going to get the size of the element. So here I'm going to create a constant. I'm going to call it size. It's equal to a wait slider that get size. Okay, so this method right here is going to return two values for us. It's going to tell us how wide the element is, or the width of the element, and the height of the element. Okay, so we also want to print that information out just to show you guys what it's going to look like. So we're going to say here that the width, let me put some symbols here so it make it easier to find later. I'm going to say that the width is equal to, and then we're going to say size dot, and then we'll say width. Okay, so because this value of size is going to return, it's going to have two values in it. We want to get the width of the element. All right, so we're also going to duplicate this line, and we're going to get the height of the element. Okay, so here we're going to say height, and we're going to say over here height as well. All right, so let's go ahead and see what this is going to print out. All right, so the test is done executing, and here we can find the information that we wanted to print out. So we can see that the width of this element is 500 pixels. So we have 500 pixels to work with. So if we start from the center, we have 250 pixels in either direction. And then we have 15 pixels in total height. Okay, so again, we don't care too much about this one right now. Given the scenario that we're working with, we only care about the width. Now, let's say that we want to click to the right side of the element using the width as a reference. Let me show you an example of that. Okay, so let me go ahead and comment this out right here. And next, what I want to do is to click by a given offset using the width of the element. So let me create a constant here. I'm going to call this one right offset. Okay. And then I'm going to say is equal to, and I'm going to use the math library in this case. I'm going to say math.floor. okay? And this is going to ensure that we get an integer value to work with, because we need an integer whenever we want to send the click operation. We need to give it an exact integer value. And here we're going to get the width, okay? So we're going to say size dot width, and then we're going to multiply this by 0.25. And what I'm doing here is getting the total width of the element and multiplying that by 0.25 to get 25% of that. So in other words, we have 500 pixels, which is the width of the element, and we're getting 25% of that. And that's going to result in 125 pixels. And what I'm trying to do here is to get an x coordinate. In other words, an x value, and how many pixels do we want to go to the right or to the left. I'm going to use this value later. So let me just get this right now. And then we're going to say over here, await slider dot click. And we're going to passing that value, okay, the right offset, right? So essentially we're doing the same thing as we were doing up here, right? Where we're passing the x coordinate. We're doing it again here, but in this time we know exactly how many pixels based on the width of the element. So it's going to go ahead and click 125 pixels from the center of the element. So it's going to go 125 pixels to the right and then do the click operation. Let me go ahead and copy this pause right here, and we're going to add it here so that we can see that it's going to do exactly what we want it to. So let me go ahead and save this and rerun this test. And here I have the test running right now. All right, let me go ahead and make this larger and hit play. All right, so right there, it's right at the default value of 5. Then we want it to go, let me pause it now. So we want it to go 125 pixels from the center, right? So that's exactly what we're seeing right here. The same exact behavior that we wanted to see in this case, just like we did earlier, right? When we clicked 100 pixels to the right, right now we're clicking 125 pixels to the right, starting from the center. How about we click to the left of the center? So let's go back over here, and that's going to be pretty similar, right? Let me go ahead and copy this right here. And actually, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create a new constant. I'm going to say constant left offset. And again, I'm going to use the math.floor to get a whole value or an integer value. And we're going to get the width of the element. And then this time I'm using a negative 125. I could put the negative right there, or we could also put it out here, and it's going to be the same thing. And once we get that, we're now going to be going 125 pixels to the left. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this right here. And then we're going to paste it down here. And this time, instead of the right offset, we're going to say left offset. Okay, left offset. So I'm going to rerun this test. And first, we're going to see that it's going to click 125 pixels to the right. And then it's going to go ahead and click 125 pixels to the left. All right, I have the test running now. So let's go back to Lambda test. And we should see it pop up here in any minute. And there we have it. We can see here what's going on, right? The page just loaded. It's going to click to the right. And then it's going to click to the left, just as we expected. And hopefully you were able to understand how clicking works in WebdriverIO. As you can see, it's not as simple as we thought. You know, when we say click, we just don't really think about it. We don't really worry too much about where we want to click. But now we know that whenever we say click, it clicks the center of the element. And if we want to go in a certain direction, then we need to specify an X and Y coordinates. In this example, only use the X coordinate really to go left or right. But if you can think of other examples, you know, where you may want to click above the center or below the center, there are some applications for that as well. So I hope you have fun learning, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. Check out any of the links on the screen to get connected with the Lambda test community, get certified, and get access to the code that you saw today.